Yo,
Hey man, how's it going?
it's going very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Long time no speak.
Yeah, it has been quite a while. Although it seems like both of us really had quite a week.
Yeah, yeah.
So before I lose all the details, I was gonna in those questions I sent you, one
Hmm.
of the questions was like, "What do I do about this brisket?" And it's like
Oh
a,
yeah.
a
Uh-huh.
specific question that I was curious about getting answered.
Okay.
Uh, and because of that, I wanted to reconstruct as much of the actual situation as possible.
Totally.
And I can kind of explain how we got there um, at some point.
Okay. So this was you playing against Order, right? You were playing
Yeah, yeah.
this
So
guy.
I went over to my podmate's house. Guy's name is Matt. He's the one who plays the Brewers most often.
Cool.
But we've been exploring more guilds, and he's the only person I play physical guild ball with because he and his wife quarantined and didn't talk to anyone in person other than my girlfriend and I for X amount of time. We're just in a pod with them, and now
Hmm.
we're all half vaccinated,
Word.
and so we continue to hang out. But because of that, we've all just like decided to spin the wheel on playing random guilds. And because I'm trying to play hunters in this upcoming tournament, I was like, I should play hunters. Do you want to play any of the minis I brought? He's like, oh yeah, I definitely want to crack at order because he's played against them a lot, but never had a chance behind the wheel.
Cool.
So it was fun to switch out. And
Cool. Cool.
all right, uh, think we had the dog and the bear.
Uh-huh.
Where is doggo? No, 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 no. Here, being an asshole to Spigot. Then Hearn was there. Okay. So, and then Grace was knocked down and directly away from Tina. Pride was knocked down directly from you.
Doing some good knockdowns.
Dude, or no, they weren't knocked down. They were just hella far away. Because I ended up knocking down Grace in some other way, but
Mic off.
these were the knockdown because I keep thinking it was ground pound, but it was the mauling. Uh, and then
Mic
Yeah.
on.
So
Got it.
in this situation, brisket came from like here-ish with a stick stack, and
Uh-huh.
then Egret. Oh yeah, where's Egret? Egret was Egret took the ball from somewhere in like the center of the pitch and
Hmm.
on my side and ran to either get Fangtooth to come and beat exclusively her up or go get a goal, whichever my opponent chose. Uh, and Fangtooth left the main squad of my dudes to go fight her, which was totally fine by me.
Uh-huh.
And then Brisket came and did like a drive by with some I'm open shenanigans in the ball of light, and then she also route one egret, and then some like she got to score.
Okay.
So she scored. I kicked the ball back out, gave it to Skatha, and then I figured between that and Snowball, I can go and challenge Grace pretty easily, or support Cena if I don't want to give the ball back to him. Uh, and I just want to keep the ball in this area. I can like give it to some of my toughies, and then this scrum ended up going super well for me. Like over the course of the next
Yeah.
few turns, we all wind up at the rough ground where I just stay there and make him walk through traps and fight bears and get crowded on and shit like that. And like because Fangtooth is in another time zone, I was not really worried about the fight turning against me. And Brisket tried to basically be a snapshot threat while Spigot and Grace would try to come in and steal the ball off of whoever had it because the only person who's really good at holding it was Egret. So
Hmm.
from here, I had a bunch of questions about like how to handle the game going forward. And even though I thought I was in an okay position, I'm down 6 because Egret's basically dead. And the goal happened. So from here, I'm pretty sure I don't want to score another goal, at least until
Yeah.
I'm at like 6 or 8, right?
Uh-huh.
And then or I don't want to score my first goal rather, so I'll go ahead and put the score at 6 because that's what it was. Like Egret was dead.
Okay, sure.
Uh, and then but like I'm down in activation. Half of his team is at half HP or less. Like they've taken a lot of
Yeah.
damage, but like Brisket is effectively untouched. And from here, like I'm happy with how the board got to this state, but I'm unhappy with like what the hell do I do about Brisket? Like, do I just let her get away with that goal for free? Like, how do I punish Brisket being knee deep in my territory with basically full HP? Uh, I threw a trap down on her that was basically like, unless you're gonna
Uh-huh.
legendary out of it, you're gonna get trapped. Which
Yeah, yeah.
is that legal? Can I just put a trap like base contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely, and you should be. That's a really good way to do it. Like,
Okay,
I mean, anything within an inch of them means that if they try to do any form of movement other than a teleport, they will immediately suffer the trap.
right. Because and the thing the so I was gonna double check on that because I when my buddy dodged through it, I was like, I think that still triggers because like it's any movement, whereas most things say during an advance or after an advance or whatever. So like you can dodge into counter charge and not proc it, but you can't dodge in or out of a trap and not proc it, right? Like you if you
Yeah, and
move at
even
all.
uh yes, even pushes. Like if you pushed someone near it, it would suffer the
Right,
trap.
and that's why I thought dodges would trigger that because I knew
Yeah.
that one of the most common ways to trigger it was to have the hunter player push you into the trap.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of Chaska and Steeljaw's thing,
Yep.
right? Okay. So, all right, then I didn't cheat. That's dope. Uh, so then, yeah, but like, what do I do about this brisket? And to expand on that, like, I'm the in the minors game I was asking you about. Uh, Bushel ended up taking a deep score against me when, in a similar way, most of my team like was even more egregious than this, like on
Yeah.
his half of the pitch because I'm the minors, right? Like, do I just leave a snapshot turret by my goal? Do I should I have not been that far out without a defender? Like, what
Uh
what do I do about this?
yeah. So okay, so I mean, I think overall your instincts were right. I don't think you should immediately take a goal, even if you have the allocation for it. And I would have the feeling that you probably wouldn't immediately have the allocation for it anyway, based on how the game was going. I think what you want to do once you're behind on tempo like this, but you have good board positioning, I think you want to figure out a way where you can end a turn with a goal that you also win momentum on. I think that's like the key thing because you want,
Right. So like the bottom of the turn, I want to be putting the ball in.
yeah,
And it doesn't even have to be the last activation of the turn. It has to be on an activation where there isn't someone who can snap back score.
yeah, exactly. Like Pride could be still to go or whatever. It doesn't matter. But
Like it's
yeah,
Pride and Harry, they both have one, right? Who
yeah,
cares,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay, and then but I'm also winning momentum, so that way I'm not giving Harry a double activate to score, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay, got it.
And I think you could actually go for that this turn if you. I would probably also want to get a kill so that that position evens up the points. But to me, that looks relatively easy for you to do. Whether it's Spigot or Grace, it doesn't really matter too much. And so okay, so the answer to this question sort of changes, of course, depending on what the exact snapshot threat is. But in this particular case, I think if you look at the board and you think you can do that, you think you can end this turn with a momentum win that's also a goal scored, then I actually think you pretty much ignore Brisket this turn. Um, to me,
Okay.
yeah,
That seemed like the only sensible thing to do, but like after spending so long learning about and talking about jailing, this just felt so different than that, right? Like
yeah,
it felt like literally leave your captain, the biggest scoring threat,
yeah,
just unfettered, right? And like so Minx started the turn actually like here
mm,
because she was trying to support Egret and maybe mess with Fangtooth and keep him from coming back into the squad.
yeah,
Uh, but she ended up coming down here when I thought she was going to go harass Spigot over here.
sure,
She couldn't like my speed zone was over under snow by Hearn or whatever, right?
mm,
So like I couldn't get her there just with any movement manipulation. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, I guess I can just like come south and trap Brisket and then do nothing.
yeah,
So I didn't even use Blessing of the Sunfather or whatever.
sure,
And I actually started thinking that like Minx feels like you don't often allocate influence to her unless she has a specific job. Like I think that she's just good at being reach for crowd and gang up, and
Mm.
using traps is good. And if you have to give her influence, like she can attack, she's fine. But like she's not plan A for allocation. Or am I crazy?
No, no, I think that's right, and I think that often you'll give her just one, and she tries to either she tries to hit a sort of below average defense target to get the momentous guild ball on her
Yeah,
playbook,
Morty,
and then
right? Because
yeah,
effectively she just wants to hit two traps, right?
yeah, or put up mark for death. You could also do mark for death with that. So
Oh, cool. Right, right, right.
yeah, but yeah, one of the things that's really good about Migs, and one of the reasons that she's a really good squatty, is that she does a lot with a little, and part of that is defensive. If she puts a trap down and the opponent has to take the trap
Yeah,
in order to hit her,
she's 5-1.
she's
It's
yeah,
nuts.
she's
Like
infuriating to hit.
the my so Matt is no stranger to game balance. And like as I'm talking about this model and describing what it does, he's like, "Wait a minute." So she's like 5-1, almost guaranteed. I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "She better have like less than 13 hit points." Does she have like 12? I was like, "Yeah, it's literally 12." And it's like, okay, cool, because otherwise it's like unforgivable. Like her
Yeah,
defense is way too high.
yeah, and
But
even
yeah,
even at
5-1 is
12
super hard
HP,
to chew through.
she does not die all that often. Like only
Right,
only the really hideous teams bother trying to kill her. I think most of the time. Um, because she does have the downside that she's not really great at keeping you in place. There's the trap, but she doesn't have a knockdown on the playbook, so you can kind of just walk
right,
away if you really want to. But
right.
but yeah, I think your assessment is good. She's fine to attack. Momentous 2 on 5 tack is nothing to sneeze at, especially when you have traps. But it's yeah, there are better hitters for sure. Um, the cool thing about her is she's fast and infuriating. But anyway,
And she can convert momentum into influence, which is kind of nice.
yeah, yeah,
Because man,
this,
I felt so influence starved this whole game.
mhm.
Like maybe I'm just used to playing less expensive teams or teams that come with more, but like having 12 without harvest markers and having a bunch of like seemingly pretty hungry models, like
Yeah. This guild is an expensive guild to play. I think they both Hunters are one of those guilds. They're actually like Masons too, which I know you were also trying out, where they just take a ton of actions.
maybe
And
this list is bad. Like, but it felt like
no, I don't think so. No, no, no. I don't think this list. Wait, who was your? Oh, right, Egret. No, no, no. I don't think this list is bad at all. Um,
okay,
I do. It's you're never going to be able to do everything, but I think you want to really, as long as you focus on getting your free stuff out when you can, which is like getting a Blessing of the Sunfather out, making sure Cena gets to make an attack every turn if possible, and making sure to remember to use pack mentality if you're playing Snow, or really try to get Fahad to get his free charge off if you're playing Fahad. Like
right.
they have a complicated relationship to influence for sure, because they have a lot of expensive things, but they also have a lot of like discounted stuff.
Yeah, like, and the thing is like dropping Nature's Chill at the start of the turn feels like Cinnamon's buff, but way easier to use and free.
Totally.
Uh, and like Hearn's hilarious Sub-Zero teleport is like super dope.
Yeah.
And that's also free. So like, I definitely see that the value is there. It just means that like so much of it requires the first influence and a hit and positioning to get it to happen, but then is worth way more than the influence you put in.
Yeah.
Like you kind of get this force multiplier out of all of their actions, which is nuts, but like it's also very complex. Like this game, we
Totally.
didn't finish it, and I think we were playing for like 4 hours. Like both of us were playing first time guild, and we weren't clocked, and it was rough. And then at like 12:30 or whatever, my
Yeah, yeah.
girlfriend was like, "Let's go home."
Yeah.
So we dipped. But yeah, it turned like it started off me down 06, and then the last activation I took, the fight ended up like Hearn's here, Brisket's here, Grace got the ball, Spigot was here, the dog is here, and then the bear charged in, killing Brisket and leaving Spigot on one.
Nice.
And then it's like, yeah, I think from here I'm just in good shape. Like
Yeah.
Fangtooth was over here on like 7 health. Harry and Pride had both taken negligible, like they both took a mauling and one attack apiece or something like that. But like they're all hanging on by a thread, and Grace is not really a scoring threat because
Right.
my whole team is between her and the goal.
Yeah.
Uh, but like that coming to the point where I turned the game around took me like I'd have died the clock for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I either need to get a lot more games in under my belt, or with this specific team, or just get better at the non-scoring. game because like
Mm.
most of the games that I have right now are me trying to 3-0 somebody or at
Right,
least
right.
like 2-2 somebody.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the way hunters fight is very like slow and chippy and kind of defensive, so that definitely can bog down a game. But I think your instincts are correct. I think basically, and like the fact that Brisket had to come over here tells me that you roughly played the macro game of the fight correct, because you leave her over there where she was before at the start of the example, and you're just
Mhm.
like, okay, fine, you can have your snapshot threat, but that means that you're not actually using your 6 influence super striker guy, and
Right,
I'm gonna
correct. Right.
walk.
I'm gonna leave her effectively like I think that the sort of the eastern hemisphere of this pitch is worthless.
Yeah,
Like Egret's dead. Minx can walk over, but you have like Fangtooth and Brisket over here, who are honestly your fighting threat. Like,
right.
and if I am fighting over here, and eventually Skatha will find the ball and just wander up to score a goal, then so be it. But yeah, my goal was to effectively abandon half of the pitch and say, "Come over here." And if I am in a place where I want the fight to happen before my opponent is, they have to come through all of my horseshit.
Yeah, exactly. And you basically just want, like, I mean, we could even essentialize it down to that. You're basically telling Brisket that she either has to get in range of Cena or lose the game. So that's her choice.
Mhm.
That's
Okay.
like the choice you want to present to her.
Yep.
And obviously both of those choices suck. Um, and so yeah, I think that there's like if Brisket doesn't come over, then you try to score 6 or 8 points and win momentum and make it so that your opponent has to decide between taking a goal immediately, which probably Brisket could do since she still has her legendary play. There's probably ways that she can take a goal kickoff and start the turn with a goal, but that means you have the ball again and they're at 10 points, but you're at 6 or 8 and you have all the tempo in the world. You're just sitting there with like easy kills and another free goal, which is bad.
Right. And as long as like so Egret jogs on here, and effectively what I was gonna do is whoever gets the ball next, like if he ever stops the tackle-a-thon, because effectively he just kept trying to tackle, get free damage and not die. And I just kept whatever the next activation was, it was like, no, take the ball back, maybe do some damage, and then keep you in this like shitty -2/-2 horrible hole. Plus, like
Yeah,
leaving, you take enough parting blows to definitely die. So you have to do it on an activation where you're dodging.
right.
Was eventually pass. If you ever give up the tackle game, pass the ball to Egret and then just park her in a forest, and
Yeah.
then she can delay long enough to hopefully get me to not lose. But like from there, I only have to lose one model to lose if they get the second goal. So if
Yeah.
they get the second goal, then but like none of these targets are easy for order to kill, right? Like you'd have to
Yeah.
kill the dog twice.
Mhm.
Uh Healing Cena takes infinite influence. Like it's at this point like the weak link is Skatha, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess Herd has the worst defenses, but like
Yeah, I
feels
mean, I
like they
think
would kill
if you
Skatha.
could, if your opponent could get Fangtooth and Spigot onto Hearn is probably comparably easy to kill to uh Skatha, but it's one of those two, regardless, for sure.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, moving on. Uh Thank you for this. I just wanted to dump this out because
Yeah,
once we
yeah, of
start
course.
talking about the high level stuff, I will forget the nitty grittier of the game.
No, this is good stuff.
So
I think this is like, I mean, I think this type of thing is helpful and important, and it sort of speaks to a more general idea, which is that like when you're playing a 3-0 guild who know and you really know that you're really going to be a 3-0 guild, you're just taking goals as fast as they're presented to you without really strategizing. But
right,
if you are both playing team, if either you're against a 3-0 guild or neither of you are playing 3-0 guilds, then the tempo of like when you score a goal is a bit more complicated, and you kind of, as the fighting team, you kind of want to like trap them in situations where they give up a ton of like real estate and tempo by taking the goal that's presented to them, basically.
right. Which like the choice is again a lose lose choice, right? Like
Right.
either you give up a bunch of board position and tempo to take the goal, or you don't take the goal. Both I'm happy with both, right? Like
Right.
basically, as I think as the hunter player, I came to terms with the fact that every turn that elapsed, I think I was happy with. Like I just wanted more turns to happen
Yeah.
because the more activations I take, the more my random guaranteed chip damage matters, and I think that influence for influence, my activations are better than the order's activations.
Hmm.
So the more I take, the more theoretical in-game value I'm getting. which has
Yeah,
to add up somehow.
definitely. And like I think, yeah, two things. One, yeah, see, Cena in particular is such a pain in the ass for a guild like order. Like it's so hard to kill, and it hits so hard back at them that it's just like they really will feel like they have to fight 9 inches away from Cena at all times, and it's pretty easy for. And when you're playing Skatha, it's pretty easy for you to make that effectively impossible. Um, and then the other thing about it is that like Skatha's card might make you feel like you're playing like an 100% goal dependent team, but in my opinion, you're really not. You're just making it so that if you do feel like you need to take goals, they are always
I
trivial.
can.
Yeah, they're always
Yeah.
trivial for you. That's
Yeah,
like the
yeah, and the thing
advantage
is,
you're
but if
buying.
I want to fight, like I'm not, I'm giving up a fighting character, like she's pretty bad at fighting, but also like Snowball and Cold Snap, and honestly, Blessing the Moon Gone, or not Cold Snap, but Snowball and Nature's Chill
Yeah,
mean that like I get fights that you might not otherwise think I get.
yeah, exactly. And you can, yeah, like most of the time, yeah, like Cena, or sorry, Theron and Steeljaw make all targets very killable for Cena, and Skatha does not do that, but Skatha gives Cena access to targets it wouldn't normally have, basically.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yep, yep, yep. The lack of snared was actually super noticeable. Like
Mhm.
hitting Cold Snap was dope because
Yeah,
it was a lot of snared very quickly.
right.
But otherwise it was Minsk or out. Like
Yeah.
Hearn very unreliably does it. Oh, but I did do the I think I figured out the whole gag of Vet Hearn, which I did not actually know until I was the situation was like this, and he was attacking Spigot, but could have speared Brisket and teleported over.
Mhm.
And I didn't. I until I literally had the choice to attack to get Brisket instead. I was like, oh, that's why he has that teleport power. Like
Yep.
that's super cool.
You can also actually do goal runs with him by doing that, which is kind of funny. He's sort of terrible defensively as a striker. Like you can't leave the ball on him because he'll lose it immediately to any credible
Right.
ball threat. But if
Yeah.
you get him the ball, he can actually score from pretty far away with a little bit of dice on your side. It's kind of funny. Um, but yeah,
The other cool thing is that with Skatha, his Winter's Blessing rule stacks with her fast ground that she makes because
yes,
like
exactly.
so I could get +4/+4. This was actually Matt noticing because I was like shorthanding. I was like, oh yeah, all my models at least ignore slow ground, and some of them treat it like fast ground. And it was like, well, this one is not exactly treated like fast ground. It's like you get a fast ground bonus from slow ground, which stacks.
Yeah, so in
That was cool.
pitches like this one that you've laid out, he can be like 8-10 move or something like that,
Yeah,
which is hilarious.
yeah. It was very strong.
Yeah.
It like I would read him as 4/6 or whatever, and then toward the end of the match, Matt was just like, "Yeah, I just assume Hearn can go 13 because like he can go 8 by walking and then throw a spear 6, and yeah,
Yeah.
he can go wherever he wants."
So yeah, I
Uh,
think if you're struggling for snared, I would try out fiddle around with the Egret and Hearn slots for Chaska, Jakar, and Edge. I think those are all interesting picks for Skatha. I think Egret can be dropped when you're kicking, at least because I don't expect you to be holding onto the ball for as long, which is one of her best traits. But she's still good. All six of the models you drafted are good, so I don't think you've done like a bad job here. But that's just like if you want to try a Scathe list that is it's a little bit easier to apply snared, then I would put in Jakar for one of those two and try that out.
Jakar, it was the last slot was between Jakar and Hearn. Like the other
Yeah,
five
yeah,
were basically auto picks, and then I picked Hearn because I felt like Last Light was important in the same way
mm,
that Blessing of the Sunfather was important. Like it let
yeah,
me spend momentum instead of influence. I
yeah.
never actually used it, which was surprising. Like I triggered it every turn. He always dropped it, but I never
Sure,
actually
right.
spent the momentum to do the thing.
Hmm.
Uh, but
Yeah, it's a good rule, but it's not always useful. But it's nice to have. And sometimes you realize that your Scathe goal run is like one influence short, but that will do it because she can spend it to give herself blessing
Snowball or
or
whatever.
snowball.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Cool. Uh,
Okay,
so
cool.
yeah, that was the end of this Hunters game.
Hmm.
Let's see what else did I write down about this Hunters game. How do I allocate? We did traps. Oh, more traps basics questions because the rule is not super clear
Oh,
on the
sure.
card. Are there any other rules about the traps like that are in the rule book or whatever? Because I couldn't find them. But basically, if if friendly ends an activation on it, nothing happens, right? Like not just within one. Like, can I actually end on the
You
marker,
can't be
or
on
can I
it.
not?
It has like a
Okay,
physical space. So
okay.
yeah. It
So
also
it is like terrain in which I can move on over whatever through, but I can't
yeah.
literally end on it.
It also yeah, but enemies can end on it because they destroy it by moving close to it.
Right,
However,
because the
it's
moment they go within 1 inch, it evaporates and gives them snared and deals one.
right. But it's also worth noting that because it doesn't interact with teleports, people also can't end a teleport on top of a trap, which sometimes very infrequently matters. But like if you're
That
playing against
that's the kind of
miners,
thing I want to know, right? Like
yeah,
the place. If you get placed, if I wanted to stop, say, Brisket Legendary and Fangtooth, I could put the trap where I didn't want her to show up on Fangtooth, right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
okay,
Or
great.
yeah, um, sometimes I think especially if you were playing Steeljaw into miners, for example, because you have access to so many more traps and they teleport every activation. Sometimes you can
Yeah,
actually play around that. You can be like, oh, his goal run needs him to teleport like this. I can just put a trap there or whatever. But
and honestly, like putting a trap against a 50 mil base is like, yeah, you don't really have a lot of choice about where this is going. So
yeah, yeah.
okay. And then ideal activation order, I think we talked about.
Mm.
And then what does an opening look like? Well, the thing is, if winding up in this situation is good, I think I figured out what openings look like. Okay, cool. That's all of my hunter's questions.
Sweet.
The other game that I played was before we get into guilds, I guess.
Sure.
Was as miners I kicked into Grange.
Okay.
I lost, but it was very close. And then I think I identified the major mistakes were I assumed that Fissure was actually tanky because she's a tank, uh, but she is decidedly like the most fragile member of the team. Uh,
Yeah, it sort of depends, but I think that's definitely yeah. Against something like Grange Hunters, I think she would be for sure.
and then I ended up opening with her, playing to the center of the pitch, trying to get a pylon, and then I knew she would eventually die, but I thought I could have a turn where she just like turned on the knockdown and knocked down the whole world.
Mm.
Instead, she died, and then I didn't ever find time to kill Windle, and then he just run roughshod over me. Like it was like the Order versus Cena. Like I think I'm supposed to kill Windle, even though he's a pain in the ass to kill. I don't know. Uh, my main question was in a similar situation to this game where Brisket is like down here, uh, but instead she has the ball, and because I lost my tank early in the turn, I'm at activation disadvantage, right?
Mm.
So I was supposed to activate last, but now I can't. So I had Shaft up here fully loaded. My plan was to eventually get the ball to anyone, and then get the ball to, or not Shaft, uh,
Spade.
shovel, spade.
Yeah.
Uh, and I could either let the goal happen, and then I was gonna crack back, do the snapback goal because it'd be very easy to.
Mm.
She had tons to play with, but I ended up spending her activation because it was the last thing on my turn, coming down to try to fight the ball, and then ended up like up here with the ball, but down momentum, and then that striker. I think it was Fathom, maybe, or no, it was who's this Bushel. It
Mm.
was Bushel stole the ball, uh, and then just like kicked it in, for the second goal. So
Mm.
like, should I have just conceded the goal and left my striker in a good position to score, or is it worth like if you're down and you can cost them an activation at the top of the turn, is it worth coming down and interfering with that effectively?
Hmm. Some of that's I'm trying to think about. So I actually think okay. So there's a few things that are sort of specific to miners that I would think about doing. One of them is that Spade has that remote detonation ability, which is like the untargeted move a model.
Untargeted push. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I actually, in that particular instance, I think my instinct would be to take the ball from Brisket, or I'm sorry, not Brisket. Take the ball from
Bushel.
Bushel,
Yeah.
and then punt it up the field towards the enemy's goal, and then pull Bushel out of snapshot range with remote detonation, if that was a thing that you could do with your allocation. I think that that
Yeah, I think it would have because I ended up having uh another influence,
mm,
and I couldn't pass it anywhere, so I just put an attack into.
Yeah. So I think okay, basically your option, the two options you should be weighing. One is dependent on both your plan cards and exactly how much you were down momentum. Because I think if Spade could, for example, hit someone like Windle for enough momentum, effectively guaranteed, whether that's four or if she had some way to wrap five momentum to.
Well, I
Uh,
can't generate momentum off a window, right?
you can't generate momentum from damaging Windle. You can from pushes and dodges and stuff.
Oh my God, that is a huge difference.
Oh yeah,
I
okay, yeah,
definitely
yeah.
just I definitely just read empathy. This is me being a novice coming through. I read empathy as like you can't generate momentum from attacking this model.
No, no, it's just damaging the model. Any playbook damage result that successfully damages Windle does not generate momentum, regardless of what else it says. So like damage and dodge still would not generate momentum because it has damage in it, but just a
But
dodge
any
would.
momentous result that does not deal damage
Yeah,
as a number.
right.
Okay.
Um,
Fantastic.
yeah, so
This is
that's a
great to know.
that's a big thing about Windle. I can see why you were struggling with him then because he is hard to kill in some ways in that you don't get a lot for killing him, whereas normally hitting a 2-0 model or whatever the hell would be
Just be a
like a
farm,
fountain,
right? Exactly.
right?
Like,
But
yeah, and that's why they have to put that result on that.
mm,
Otherwise, it's like, oh man, this person like playing them is such a gigantic liability.
yeah, but he still is a liability actually for models or for teams like miners because you can do a lot of other stuff using him. Or like for example, navigators love hitting Windle even though they're never going to kill. Well, they could try to kill him, but they probably aren't going to. But
Right, but
you
no, they
can,
just get to net it the shit out of people, right? Yeah,
yeah,
like
or
I
dodge like
just want
eight
to hit
inches.
every not every result I could possibly want, or like round the clock 360 you,
Yeah,
because I get my momentous dodge every time. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
exactly.
that's game changing. Like I it's like misreading that white goes first in chess. Like I fucked up. I did
Yeah.
not understand how that rule worked at all.
Yeah. So I guess my basically I think plan A would be Spade hits somebody to get momentum advantage that you are positive you can capitalize on with the card. If that's not possible mathematically, then I think plan B would be the thing I said earlier. I think you would take the ball from Bushel, kick it somewhere far away from Bushel, and pull her out of snapshot range. Because
Yeah.
my assumption, without seeing the exact game state, is that if Bushel is out of snapshot range and you've kicked the ball away, there's no way they can get a goal on the first activation. So, and then you go back to threatening it yourself.
Well, it would have the way to do it would have been uh Grange was like near a scrum. Like honestly, this game's actually pretty close to how it looked. So this is Grange, this is Windle, and then Grange could have gone in and kept the scrum in the farmer's favor, and instead, uh, what he could have done was get three momentum, go over here, pass the ball, let pass and move or no, you can't pass and move and snapshot.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So no, that wouldn't have been possible then. Yep, that works.
Yeah. So that is a relatively unique solution to Spade. I mean, there's probably some other striker that could do something similar, but that's like the remote
No, but like
detonation being diceless is.
it's an innovative answer to the puzzle, which is like just make sure that this person can't score on the first activation, which in addition to removing the ball from them also says put them out of snapshot range.
Yeah.
Which yeah, okay.
And it's also so like one of the things about goal scoring tempo in Guild Ball is that so when a striker scores a goal and sits there to continue being a snapshot threat and they're not immediately attacked or something or engaged or whatever, then that is a lot of power. Like it's really frustrating for the opponent to deal with the fact that there's like a costly, slightly less lucky goal that's way easier to hit in terms of distance, which is the snapshot. But when strikers get left to do that, if they're pushed out of that effective range for any way, then they suddenly become extremely useless because they're often not allocated anything or not allocated very much, and they suddenly have to decide between trying to go for a goal on their own activation or spending a whole ass activation just walking 2 inches
Getting
back into
back into yeah,
yeah, which is
getting
like a
back into
huge loss of
snapshot.
tempo usually. So I think that in general, if you're dealing with an opponent who posts up for snapshot threats a lot, I think just having like someone with a push hanging around on your side of the field is a really good way to deal with that strategy. because
Fantastic.
it doesn't totally destroy the strategy, but it makes it way less efficient than it normally is.
It's not just like a freebie that you leave open. Like you actually
Yeah,
have to plan
exactly.
around it. And when it becomes more telegraphed, honestly, the snapshot's less terrifying. Like the
Yeah,
problem is that the snapshot can happen at any time, so most of my activations have to be like go for unprofitable knockdowns, like stretch to make sure that this person can't both move and stand up, that kind of stuff.
right, exactly. And
So,
like plenty of not a there might not be a lot of models that can just straight up score a goal in a given situation, but there's probably almost all of their models except for their mascot could theoretically walk over and give a snapshot to Bushel in that situation because she's so much
yeah,
further up the
exactly.
pitch. So
Right.
yeah.
And because of Grange, like the math is, it was the first time I saw for the family really be
Mhm.
scary because like then the pass range is also gigantic.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And passing at full length, like it doesn't matter that you're not going for tap in passes because everyone's passing at like 4+ dice, right?
Right,
Like
yeah.
it was very strong. All right. Um, so those were the two I played in person.
Cool.
And the rest of the games didn't really have interesting questions come up, just more stuff that we've already addressed, and they went according to plan.
Mhm.
Uh, so the remaining guilds are cooks, fish, miners, union, rats, morticians, and I put them in that order because I think they go shortest to longest, except for rats. And then I put rats adjacent to morticians because it's worth
Mm.
the transition, maybe.
Yeah, cool.
Uh, so quickly, we did cover butchers, and we were almost going to cover cooks. I
Mhm.
just want to ask the question: uh, when do I play shank and or tenderizer? And I think it's super rarely. Like I just play the box, right?
Yeah, in my personal opinion, you never play Tenderizer, literally never.
Okay.
I just he loses so much compared to the Cook's models. He's not worth it. And then I think you could play Shank in situations where he really seems like the best kickoff model. So it would have to be kicking, and I think it would only be a few matchups. But I think playing the box is at least fine in every matchup. And there might
Okay,
like,
wonderful. So
yeah.
this also means that if I hook someone up with the cook's box, that I've given them a strong guild.
Oh yeah,
Like
totally. Yeah, I think
it's
that'd
not
be
like
fine.
I have to go out and because I feel like if I hook someone up with like sing when you're winning and drop of old jakes, like until I get them a vet decimate, I'm kind of nerfing them, right? Like
Yeah.
you kind of need that model. So
Yeah, I think actually somebody was asking this in the Discord a couple weeks ago, right after you and I had one of our talks. Basically, the same question about like what guilds are really good with just one box, just in case I can't get the other ones. And I think most of the minor guilds are good picks, but especially navigators and cooks. I think if the person you're giving them to is comfortable just playing six models over and over again, like that's not
right,
going to bore them, then cooks and
right.
navigators are awesome picks for that. They're both
And I
great.
think that like if I can, because I can either proxy or find egrets, hopefully. But I think that Falconers with egret is also super playable. Like
Mm,
Vethern is fine, but I think that egret is the one that you want on the squad most often, and you're only replacing Icarus most of the time.
yeah.
Um, and then with navigators, I actually didn't realize that like Angel's a never play.
Yeah.
So,
I do think
uh,
if you wanted to like be seriously competitive with navigators, you gotta get a siren eventually. But until you're at the point where you're like, yeah, I want to win tournaments, playing the six every game is totally fine.
yeah, and I was able to find a bunch of super nice people from the Facebook groups to send me some sirens. So
Oh, awesome.
we've accumulated some.
That's great.
Uh, Next we have the fish, which I think I get because they're kind of 3-0-y. I just had some questions
Hmm.
about them relative to order, and roster questions. So is the captain split basically like Yukai and X? You take like Yukai Shark or Yukai Corsair, or is it like you take Corsair X and you pick your scory captain?
Yeah, no, I think it's Corsair X because I don't think that Yukai and Shark have like enough of a playstyle differential or difference between the two that like. First of all, I
It's the
don't
same
think.
reason you take like either Steel Draw or Theron and Scatha,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I think there have been really good fish players who have played Shark Yukai, but I that's not something I would do. I think that Corsair is a really a pretty interesting captain in that he's in a mostly scoring guild, and his niche is to absolutely dunk on other scoring guilds. He's like incredibly difficult for other 3-0 guilds to play. He's sort of like the he's a reason why fish never have to play 3-0 versus 3-0 if they don't want to, which is something some people including
God,
me
that
don't like doing.
awesome
Yeah.
because 3-0 versus 3-0 is a miserable matchup.
Yeah, I
Oh
really
my
don't like
god.
playing that type
It's
of
like who
game.
gets the ball first or who misses the goal first. Like
Yeah.
either one of those is just the game. It
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah. Whereas Corsair is just like this. I mean, the downside, or I mean, some people would say this is a downside. It depends on your disposition as a player, but is that you're playing kind of like a miserable defensive mountain list. Like your Corsair's whole thing is that he pulls you into the no fun zone and keeps knocking you down and hitting you for little points of damage and saying no, you can't have the ball. You're staying here over and over again until you die. And then,
That's that's
but
deeply Vincey, if I had to
yeah,
guess. I don't know
yeah.
Vince very well, but I think that sounds like a Vince thing to do.
Yeah, it is. He's like the melee version of what Vince liked about Smoke, I think.
Okay, that sounds dope.
Yeah.
So the meme of Corsair sumoing people off the pitch, is that a thing that like happens routinely, or is that just something that Corsair can do if people get sloppy or if the it's available?
No, I think that's totally legitimate. I think uh, in some ways he's the best at doing it. So I think that like outside of his legendary turn, he doesn't necessarily move people as far as some other models in the game. But the thing about the legendary is he can just like, I don't know if you're looking at his card right now. I'm gonna put him on the pitch, but um, the thing about his legendary is that once a game, he can just be like, "No, fuck you. The fight's over here now," and like your half of your team is suddenly within 6 inches of the edge of the pitch or worse. And in that context, he's actually really good at like knocking one model off the pitch himself and setting up models like Jack and Kraken and Knuckles to do that too. Um,
Sure, yeah.
I so like at least it's been a while since I played against the Corsair, but it used to be at least, and this I think this was the same version of him. It was this, at least pretty close. He his kicking off, his sort of like kicking off gimmick was, most of the time when, unless there's fast ground involved, most teams will kick off from something roughly central, so they're threatening a lot of the board. But
Yeah.
Corsair actually would do this different thing where he would be like, especially if he got fast ground. But even if he didn't, he'd be like, I'm going to kick off from here, and I'm going to kick the ball, where's the ball, to here. And then at some point, my activation is I'm going to sprint to here, legendary, and 3 of your models are like here now. And then I'm going to make 6 attacks and knock one off the pitch. And then this is like, you're a scoring team, and you have the ball or whatever. He didn't get the ball. We'll assume you didn't make a huge mistake. But at the end of turn one, you scored a goal maybe if you're lucky, and this is what the rest of the game looks like. And it's like, okay, what do I do now? That's sort of his thing.
Sure. Uh, okay, that actually seems super cool. Okay, so rules wise, if he shoves someone off, did they die in the aura for coup de grace or no?
No, coup de grace
Okay,
is effect is yeah, they don't
you
suffer
must
the
you must kill
basically.
them when they exist, and they cease to exist when they leave the pitch.
Yeah, exactly. They, when stuff dies off the pitch, it dies in no physical relation to any other model, if that
Right.
makes sense.
It's in the taken out zone. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. And then uh Shark is like it's synonymous with like scary striker captain.
Hmm.
And like everyone talks about like, oh yeah, if you're playing some like super scory captain like Shark, and it's like I can name what I think are like two scorier models than Shark. Like, why is Shark the scoriest captain? Is it because of the fact that he brings the other five scoring models instead of like the orders lineup, or like what? Why is it just because of like he was the first, so everyone just uses him as the prototypical example? What makes Shark's card more 3-0 than Brisket's card?
Yeah, I don't think it does. I think it's a combination of all the things you said. I think it's, first of all, is that he's the first, and like when the game first came out, he was the archetypal 3-0 captain, and there wasn't anybody that could do it better. And two, I think that he can bring a list that has a lot of other good goal threats, especially, I mean, I really can't tell you how much adding Fathom to Fish reignited the fire for Fish, because they didn't have a squatty striker quite like Fathom until she dropped. Uh, I actually, for me personally, the defining feature of Shark and why you would play him if you wanted to is the legendary, and in particular it's actually sort of talking about this game that you had where you were playing Skatha versus Order. Um, he makes setting up a situation where the enemy team is really disincentivized from like scoring pretty easy. And he also he kind of time walks you a little bit. Sorry, that's like a I think that's a War Machine term originally. Do you know what
No,
that
it's
means?
nope. It's
Oh.
Time Walk is a Magic term original. I was like,
Oh,
wow, I
okay.
thought you didn't know Magic. So
I don't.
the card Time Walk comes from, or the term Time Walk comes from the card Time Walk,
Mm,
which is one in a blue mana. It says target player loses their next turn, which got
right,
rephrased
right.
to target player takes another turn after this one. But because of the original phrasing, people talk about time walking you as you
Mm,
lose your next turn. So
yeah,
effectively, either if you're granted an extra turn or someone loses their next turn, that's getting time walked.
yeah,
But every game that has competitive Magic players that have moved to it has started adopting the get time walked vernacular.
yeah.
But yeah, comes
So I
from Magic.
think yeah, so Shark is kind of like the ideal Shark thing is he ends turn 1 by scoring a goal, and then he begins turn 2 by legendarying as much of your team as you can and scoring a goal again, and then using the run the length dodge to go somewhere out of range of most of your -4/-4 people. And it's sort
Because
of
they're
just
also
like
slow, sure.
yeah, and it's sort of like I'm up 8 points, you have to figure out how to get through this turn where you basically can't move without letting me get another goal at the top of turn 3. That's like his question that he asks, that he tries to ask every turn or every game. And
So his legendary is supposed to be what keeps him from becoming the model that scores and dies.
yeah, exactly. It like gives him it's supposed to give him a lease on life long enough to be a threat for another goal after whichever one he legendaried with, and then it's also like supposed to give his team enough time to be a kind of oppressive set of goal threats later in that turn, if that makes sense. Because you're,
Yeah. You can't stop them all. You pick a side, and
yeah,
whatever side you don't get to is where I send my, 12-inch threat
right.
striker or whatever.
And even if the opponent's decision, which is probably right for a lot of guilds, is like, okay, well, I'm gonna go hide in the corner with the ball, and we're never gonna use it again. They still go 4 inches less far away than they would have otherwise during his legendary. So
Right.
I actually, yeah, Fish, I think because of the way the game started, Fish gets sold as like the all-out 3-0 god guild, and I don't think that's true. I think the way to think about Fish is they're a scoring guild with a control sub-theme, specifically a movement control. Because I think if you look at their cards sort of holistically, the thing that makes them remarkable isn't their incredible tackles or their incredible kicks, because they have
Right.
good
Yeah.
tackles and they have good kicks, but they're not the best at either of those. It's that they are gods of pushes and dodges, of moving models, basically, and
Right.
that's both a speed element and a control element. And most of the
And
models
they've
in
got a bunch of plays that like gut and string or whatever that are
yeah,
also like
exactly.
slowing you and yeah, okay.
And most of the models in the guild are like really explicitly themed on either pushes or dodges. So like Shark is like a dodge fish, but Corsair is very much a push fish.
And
And
Kraken is a pusher.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay, great. So me coming in and reading basically the entire 5 year history of Guild Ball in the month after the fact was like an archaeologist who dug and found like 2 generations worth of goods. It's like, oh man, I see this like flat screen TV and this 2-inch but built in a couch worth of wood
Mm.
television set that uses cathode ray tubes, right? Like, what am I looking at? So when I would read all this stuff about like Fish being the baller 3-0 guild, it was like, I mean, I guess, but I'm reading
Yeah.
like the minors and I read the order, and they just seem way more scory than that.
Yeah.
So okay,
Yeah, no, the difference is that they like the order has effectively no control. They basically have no say in what their opponent does. They're
right.
just
It is.
sprinting
I'm gonna
around.
go as hard as I can at the ball,
Yeah.
and hope to God that whatever you're doing doesn't interfere with that.
Yeah, but fish actually have
And
input about the opponent's behavior and like stats and stuff.
it feels like the cooks have the sort of psychotically '06 mindset.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's like I don't really have any idea what a ball even is. Like I don't know why I'm on a soccer field, but I'm gonna kill 6 of you, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah, and
okay,
cooks and falconers to me are like pure glass cannons. They just hit as hard as possible from as far away as they can, and then they die if they didn't kill the thing.
they ask you if you're dead, and if not, they immediately crumble.
Yeah.
Uh, question, "Are you dead?" is a good question to ask, though.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So then, that was fish. Oh yeah. Are there any fish that I just never play? Like, is salt is as bad as he reads compared to tentacles, or am I
I
crazy?
really don't like Salt. I've seen people play Salt. I think it's all a gimmick. I don't think that that slot should be taken by a scorer, and if it is, it needs to be better than Salt. I think Tentacles is amazing, and
Yeah. Okay.
I
Great.
yeah, I think
That
Tentacles is really
that
amazing.
the immediate read of like, yeah, I can find reasons to LOL he'll score a goal, but like I don't really think so. And I think
Yeah.
like putting him in as 0.25 of a striker versus what Tentacles just is seems like a waste of a slot.
Mm.
Uh,
The only other model in the guild that I think you just don't play is Angel. Reading through all of them, I think that they all have reasonable arguments to be in at least some matchups. Maybe some of this stuff gets kind of invalidated by how good Fathom is, but I think it's all playable except for Angel and Salt, personally. So,
okay. Okay. I can't get over the fact that like when I originally read Linked, I assumed Angel was like some terrifying five head goal threat where like I just needed to have one more fish game replay like where I get to watch it and see how it happens, but feels like it doesn't actually work.
the thing about man, if Linked was in the opposite direction, we'd be talking. If it was Angel then Fathom, then you would have this like comically long goal threat with Fathom that would be incredibly safe. But I Angel just does not have the stuff. She's not worth the slot for just a good kick when
Right.
the other
And
thing
the
is
thing is like Fathom can't she Angel can't keep up with Fathom. So like
yeah
Fathom will get in a place where she can score and then it's like, "All right, Angel, your turn." She's like, I'll see you next turn." Right? Like
yeah
she's just too far down the pitch.
yeah and like most of the goals that you would try to take with some sort of Fathom to Angel gimmick, Fathom can just take because she's so good. So
Right, right. Yeah. Oh, look, Fathom and insert plastic here can score
yeah,
because
exactly.
right. Okay. So that solves fish for me. Miners, I got three quickies.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, take Salvo when don't I take Colossus, and who from the box sits when either of those picks happen.
Okay, give me 1 second. I need to look at Salvo's card because he's changed a lot, and his last change I don't think I've had a lot of plays with. So let me make sure I understand.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think Salvo brings you into more of a mixed game, and I think being able to tetherball stuff is really good. I guess what would I think he's pretty good at delaying. I think you play him against at least against like sort of squishy killy teams, so like butchers and cooks and union, because he does enough damage to like let miners get 1 or 2 kills, and range knockdowns are pretty annoying for teams that are trying to close the distance with you while you
Galloping,
jump
yeah.
around
Yeah,
scoring. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and I think he's always at least okay. He's good. The thing is, the reason I'm looking at him is because he used to be able to take more influence, which meant that his goal threat personally was a lot better because he would like tetherball, then shoot, then sprint, then score, which is like a lot of movement.
Yeah,
But he can't do that anymore, so I think that's less good. Uh,
that seems reasonable.
yeah, but I still think he's pretty solid. I would take Colossus almost all the time. I think he's a
Yeah,
really good tar pit model. I think that like he benefits from both the legendary and Fisher's movement thing quite a lot in the
big
same way that
time.
yeah in the same way that Mule does because they're so gigantic. To answer who drops, I think the first pick to drop is Fuse. I think Fuse
That
and
was my take as well.
yeah
But
to
then
me
I kept reading Clear and I was like, man, Clear seems so good, but like I dropped Fuse and so I played Box minus Fuse plus Colossus and I felt like that's a pretty good standard list. Like I would have to find reasons to not
mm,
play that six, I think.
yeah, that's what I would probably play a lot of the time too. I think Fuse and Salvo sort of have similar roles in that they're like okay at a lot of things without being a godlike striker or godlike killer or something, and they're kind of a fixer for dead balls and stuff like that. Um, and maybe which you choose is either a matchup thing or sort of just up to preference. I do think actually if you this will probably sound weird, but I think if you receive, there's probably times when you could actually not play Spade, um, where you do a level one, a turn one, where you don't do a lot of interacting and your last activation is just Fuse going for a goal from a million miles away. Because he does actually, on his own, if he can use under the lines on an enemy model, he goes like a truly absurd distance by himself because he has
Okay.
the highest movement in the guild and has his teleport. Um,
Yeah.
but and then the reason you would do that, the reason you would not take Spade, is you're gonna score one goal and then you're gonna try to fight it out against another 3-0 guild, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So you're
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
receiving against navigators or something like that. I
Yeah.
think that's like a legitimate thing to try, but I don't. Yeah, this is one of the rare guilds in the game where I really don't think there's a bad model in there. I think all six of the squaddies are at least solid, um, and it's just about like to me you gotta keep Mule and Fisher in. I just think they bring too much on their own.
I think yeah. Well, to me it was all the robots. Like
Yeah,
I felt like basically every Mechanica was a must take because they're all monsters.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then you just pick someone who can make goals happen.
Mm, right.
Uh, cool. Oh, so there was a Strictly the Worst where y'all were covering the excavators, and
Mm,
someone mentioned, I think it was Pat, that they have a unique relationship to free balls instead of held balls, and I wanted to make sure I understood the context because like a lot of it was just assumed knowledge from like an
mm,
advanced listener, and I think it's because they're placed a lot instead of advancing a lot, which means that they don't get to snap the ball as often. So like if I'm playing against the miners, it's actually safer for me to have Mash in the corner doing his little Heidi job, not holding the ball, instead just being in front of the ball, uh,
mm.
such that you have to get through him to snap it, which a place can't do. Is that what they meant? What y'all meant by an interesting relationship to free balls, which is why like three of their spells have to do with free balls?
Yeah, so that is almost certainly what we meant, and I think that your reading is right, but because of their abilities, it's more contextual, and especially Fisher's legendary is a real like wrench in that idea. Like
Sure.
you sort
Like
of, but
in a
if
what I'm saying is in a world where they didn't have the ability to do Fisher's Legendary, my
yeah,
strategy would be
exactly.
don't pick up the ball. So like instead to make the game feel normal, there are a bunch of things that are like, no, 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 we're actually going to be really good at getting free balls, so you have to
Hmm.
pick them up and we have to come to you and tackle you and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And like Fisher in particular is like really complicated to defend the ball from because she can do one of the most annoying things she
Knockdown
can.
free ball, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about grinding tracks in particular is you brought up Mash. She doesn't have to pop Glub Mass to knock him down. She just has to get in base to base with him.
Because it's
Which
not an attack, right?
yeah, yeah. Which maybe that might be difficult on its own because she's not super fast, but still, it's like she is a very complicated puzzle to defend the ball from if she's anywhere near it.
Yep, I threw her away real bad. But I do think that guild is super fun, and I think that most of the guild's power is in her. It's
Mhm.
just like so much of it. If she's if she's dead on turn one, it
That's pretty
becomes
rough.
pretty unwinnable very fast.
Yeah, you lose a lot of
uh,
movement and threat if you don't have her on the pitch for sure.
all right. Next we've got the Union.
Mm,
And this might be a little bit longer than the slow ones, but or the short ones, but I'm not sure. How do the captains play beyond sort of the obvious? Like I think the most confusing one is uh greed.
mm,
And if you haven't played a lot of greed, then I think that my like random read the card take on it is probably not that far off. But if you have played a lot of Union, specifically greed, because I know for a while you played Union because they were fighty.
mm.
Uh, I would love to know your take, and then the standard question of like which squaddies go in which list.
Yeah, I played a ton of Greed right when he came out. I was super excited about him. I thought he was totally busted, and I guess
Well, that's
everybody,
when he was busted,
yeah,
but
everybody did because he got
yeah,
nerfed pretty quick.
I
Yeah,
feel like
so
that being an aura and not a pulse was, or that being a pulse on an aura was very stupid.
yeah, it's pretty nuts. He was pretty crazy, and he used to have more output too because he was 5 tack instead of 4. But anyway, uh, yeah, so. I mean, I guess the way to think about Union and what their like sort of role is they are like very high statted models that are basically entirely focused on offense and on being active. So they don't really have a lot of like passive effects going on outside of their activations, and they um, they don't really have a lot of good ways to defend themselves. Some of them have decent raw stats, but it's usually not in defensive ways. It's usually just like their attack is higher than you'd expect, or their playbooks just like look really good or whatever. Um, and they really just want the whole game to be very interactive. They want to like be hitting you. They want you to be hitting them back. They want to be running around, kicking the ball away from you, fighting you, scoring goals, etc., etc. Um, they're really all up in your face. I think Rage is. I mean, they all the captains also have like some way to like control their team or make them activate in unusual ways. Rage has Red Fury, Blackheart has On My Mark and the Legendary, and Greed has
Forward minions or do the thing.
Do the Thing. Yeah, exactly. And um, they're a very captain-focused team. That's probably, I mean, that's true to some extent of every guild in the game, of course.
Yep.
But
But
I,
this one seems transformative.
yeah, it's like the things that their squaddies can do radically change depending on the captain for sure. I think Rage is probably the easiest to talk about, both because I think he's the strongest and the one that would be in every list no matter what, and because his game plan is pretty straightforward. He just wants to go kill stuff. Uh, he wants all 12 models to be in that guild ball that's printed in the center of the pitch, and then
Yep.
he wants there to only be 6 models after a turn. Is basically his idea. Um, then Blackheart and Vegreed, to me, well, they're pretty different in what they want to do, but they're both playing off roles to Rage. I think Blackheart is like of the three, he's probably the best to put a bunch of buffs on. Part of that is because you get tooled up from O Rage, which obviously Vet Rage can't take, so Vet Rage can never be tooled up. Um,
Right.
but
So basically, is a model named Rage in every single Union game?
yes, absolutely. I think
Okay.
both. Yeah, I think you're playing the guild for the models named Rage, in my opinion. Like, um,
That's certainly what it seemed like.
yeah, and so Blackheart usually the thing that makes Blackheart good, if you want to be playing Blackheart, is that he is a pretty uninterruptible activation. He's got a lot of dodges on his playbook. He's got 2-inch melee. He's got Shadow Like. He's 3-2 and could be 4-2 for a turn. And he can make 6 attacks. So he's deceptively fast despite being 4-6 because he's really 6-8 and can become 8-10 if you legendary with him if you want to do that. And he can kind of score goals. Or actually, he can score goals pretty good, but he's not great at taking the ball because his tackle's kind of bad. And he can butchery people to set his team up, and he's always kind of going to be in the way and pestering people, and he's hard to take down because of that. His counterattack is amazing. Like a 2-inch melee model that has a 1 double dodge on 2 with 6 attack is really frustrating for a lot of teams
Pretty
to.
unreal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you
I actually
basically.
hadn't looked at that. I got stuck on reading his plays because they look so important.
Yeah,
But the one double dodge is a monstrous counterattack.
yeah. So the you said the plays are pretty important. It's actually sort of deceptive. To me, the most important thing about is his playbook. On his own, he has an okay playbook that's really good defensively. It's the counterattack that we just described. But if he gets gang ups or some other way to get tack additionally, and you can get him to be hitting the top of his playbook, he becomes a fucking god. The 3
Because
double dodge.
you're getting a double knockdown or a double dodge,
Yeah,
or a damage knockdown or a damage double dodge, right? Because that's the Thresher result.
right, and it's they're threes, and he also can butchery on his first attack if he happens to hit that. So, like, if you set him up properly, he will just nuke somebody. He's sort of like a brewer in that way, in that like without much help, he doesn't really do much in the damage department, but he kind of explodes if you can get him to the end of his book. Um,
Sure.
and I think the other unique thing about him is that he always gets to make his attacks because of Shadow Like and all of his movement. Greed, on the other hand, is really about kind of breaking fundamental rules of the game, particularly about like what models can be where. um, he he makes even when forward minions is an aura now instead of a pulse, he makes his team comically fast because you also have Grace in the guild, and she
She
can
gets
get
Talisman Quickfoot.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And she can put out multiple Quickfoots too. Quickfoot is not once per turn.
Right.
So if you can pay for it. So like Greed with O Rage, for example. O Rage becomes a 9-inch charge, so a 10-inch charging threat. He can heroic to tool himself up, and he can activate twice, which means he can get a free charge twice. That berserks twice if you set it up properly.
Oh wow. I did
um,
not realize how dumb giving him another activation was
yes.
because most of his denominator for influence is Furious Berserk.
Yep. And it's also worth pointing out that, you know, tooled up, like every buff in the game, is sustain, which means if he heroics to tool himself up, he gets that for both of his activations. Um,
Oh wow, yeah, holy shit, dude. Like going off with O Rage seems super fun.
yeah, it's a good time. Vet Greed is one of my favorite captain releases in a long time, especially when he was when he was too strong. I mean, I love playing broken stuff,
Right,
and he was.
obviously.
I played one of the last events I played in was a little team tournament in the like Detroit border of Canada. I think it was literally in Canada. It was just over the border. And I think I had two 12-0s and a 12-2 in that tournament, and I can't remember
Oh
what the last
yeah,
one was.
awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it was,
Those
and
sound like fair and balanced games to be sure.
yeah, and like I think literally all four of my rounds, my opponents who were, I mean they weren't new players, but they hadn't like been traveling for tournaments and stuff like I had.
Right, right.
Pretty and Vet Greed was very new at the time. It was like maybe like a month and a half after he came out, so not a lot of people had seen him in tournament. I think all of my opponents were like, "Yeah, I read his card and they seemed fast, but I didn't really understand that it would do that." And like I would,
I mean, I saw a lot of inches, but I didn't realize I would get hit so often and so hard.
yeah, there was like a on the bottom of turn one of one game, I knocked the opponent's captain off the back of their pitch with Fangtooth Unmaskings.
The ultimate touchback.
Yeah, yeah. With Fangtooth Unmaskings, he had just gone like some stupid because he heroicked and he got quick-footed and he got the double activation with forward minions. It was so yeah. Anyway, um, so that was those were the good old days for Vet Greed. Uh,
That's awesome.
yeah.
I'm glad that did not last for very long. But that seems.
Yeah, it was incredibly stupid.
Dude. Thank you. Just yeah. Get away from the giant monster, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess that leaves us with so Rage himself is basically just Ox plus Fillet smashed together. Where like what I'm trying to do is Ox you out in my gang, and then go off with some model that I put a bunch of buffs on, and then channel a bunch of influence through them. Quite literally in this case, because he's just going to bloody coin and then
Red Fury.
finger, red fury,
Yeah.
one of those. He's going to angry spell one and angry spell two someone enough to make them hurt someone for way more attacks than they could normally do.
Exactly. And it's worth noting he also has absurd output on his own. I mean, I don't think like if you look at his playbook, you probably know the game enough now to realize that Momentous 1-on-1, Momentous 2-on-2 with a push, and Momentous 3-on-3 is like
Is
absurd.
yeah.
It's like
Yep.
it's like a truly ridiculous damage
it's basically
profile.
what makes the bear so strong is the
Yeah.
fact that the wrap is bananagrams,
Yeah.
and like the bear also has the mauling and a cap that goes to 6, right? But
Yeah.
like the mason's half of the bear is on rage and
Right.
is slightly better because he has a 2 push.
Yeah, and he can give himself a damage buff, sort of, as long as he has a gang up. But yeah, so he sort of needs to be set up a little bit because he doesn't really want to take his knockdown, and he is pretty susceptible to counterattack since he's 1-inch melee and only 4-1. But if you do whatever needs to be done to make sure that he doesn't get counterattacked out of attacking, then he will like nuke most models from the map, given a charge and 4 attacks pretty trivially. Um, so yeah, I mean he hits extremely hard and he chooses one or more of his teammates to hit extremely hard every turn. That's his game plan.
Got it. And then are there basically take them every time type squaddies, or a bunch of squaddies to avoid, or are there squaddies that go in different captains but not in other captains?
So I think that these two guys, Minx and Rage, are well, they're take every time except you can't take Rage with Rage. But You take Minx every time, and you take Rage with the legal captains every time for sure.
Right.
And then Fangtooth's kind of special to Greed, but I think so. Grace to me is like almost up there with those two guys, but those two are like output machines, and Grace is like obviously purely support, especially for a team that doesn't have the ball of light and isn't really that interested in scoring. So
Right.
she's like just Quickfoot, but Quickfoot when it's free is really fucking good.
Effectively, it's cinnamon, but you don't have to pay influence, and I know how much you like cinnamon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think I mentioned this in one of our other talks, but one of the things about Guild Ball and about like list building in Guild Ball is that no matter what team you're playing, you cannot afford to have all six of your models do stuff.
Right.
And
You have to pick which models are there to do nothing, to effectively not get influence for a while, right?
right. And Grace and Benediction are basically the only models in the Union that can actually fill that role. So to me, I playing Union means always taking Grace or occasionally Benediction or maybe even both. But just because it's not like there probably is a literal better sixth model if that model was going to get 4 influence every turn. There certainly is. There are other good hitters in the guild, but you have to have someone in your six who doesn't have something. And Grace and Benediction are amazing at being that person. So um, so that's
Got it.
they're kind of like a special tier of like list building for me. The rest of the guild I think is solid for the most part. I don't really like Snakeskin, and I think I
My take
find
is that Hemlock seemed like A or S tier, and that Snakeskin was a failure.
mm,
Those are the only things that the only other like guesses that I had.
I don't think Hemlock is S tier, but I do think she's good. I think she brings something that the guild doesn't have otherwise. You don't have a lot of blind, and you certainly don't have a lot of range damage the way Noxious Blast is, and that chip damage is really nice. But I think sometimes so the thing about Union most of the time in most matchups is eventually your dudes are gonna die. They're not that defensible, and you're not very good at defending them. You kind of like toss Minx and Rage and your captain in to go fuck shit up, and eventually, one of them runs out of HP. It's whatever, it happens. And the problem I have with Hemlock and why I struggled to use her personally in this list in sort of the modern era is that she does not really she really caps out at being allocated 1 or 2 influence. Like even if she's one of my only models that can interact in a given turn,
Yeah.
giving her 4 influence seems incredibly stupid to me. Like it's just like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm throwing away influence. So that's the problem I have with her, but I do still think she's good. And I think if you're like expecting the opponent to stay away and you want to give them a reason to come into you, putting Noxious Blast on a couple of their models is a good thing to do because then they have to deal with the poison chip damage and stuff. Um, Mist is exactly what you'd expect. If you feel like you need to get a goal early that will then die, you take Mist. um, I don't really rate Harry the Hat in the team just because I don't think you spend a lot of time passing the ball around because I think if you receive, you're probably trying to hide the ball after a little bit, and then you just put it on
Right.
Grace because Grace isn't great at holding the ball literally, but she never has any reason to get close to an enemy, so she's
Right.
like,
She can be a million miles away,
yeah,
and her counterattack to take the ball back is exceptional.
yeah, so she's fine for that. And then Gutter, so Fangtooth, sorry, I put Fangtooth in like a greed category because I think Fangtooth is a really good hitting model that needs a little bit more tack and a lot more speed to be useful, and that's exactly what Greed gives. Greed makes him faster, make sure he actually gets into the fight where he can use his knockdown on one and then try to roll big numbers for unmaskings. But Blackheart and Rage don't do as much for him. It's pretty hard to get Fangtooth into a position where he matters. Gutter is sort of the same for Rage. Gutter benefits a lot from being able to be red furied by Rage, and Rage is very good at setting her up and giving her a bunch of attacks so she can get scything blows on multiple models. Um, I think one of the like expert level plays of playing Union is having Rage, Red Fury, Gutter to get a chain grab on somebody that didn't look like they were going to be threatened, and then chain grabbing them into range of Rage's charge on Rage's activation through Gutter, and then killing them. Um,
Okay.
so that's like, I don't know if that made sense. I'm sorry. That's
Yeah. No, it did. Like someone is playing around Rage's threat range,
yeah,
right? So instead, Rage is like, no, my threat range is longer because I'm going to use Puppet Gutter
Yeah.
to get a chain grab, and then I'm going to charge you, even though it's been my turn the whole time.
Right.
Because Gutter had already activated, and Rage was not in range to do the thing. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, it was complicated to follow, but I
Yeah.
picked up what you were putting down.
Okay, cool. So that's
Uh,
like she's like a toolbox for that type of thing, and I think she's fine in other captains, but she really shines with Rage because of that. Oh, and then I forgot Decimate. Decimate's cool. I think Decimate is like another good all-rounder. She does good damage, not amazing. She does very consistent damage. She's like Shank. She does very consistent damage that very rarely spikes. And then Second Wind is a very nice thing to have on turn one. I think Union struggles to pay for Second Wind after turn one, or things like Second Wind, because they really want to put all 13 of their influence into hitting stuff. But sometimes if you're kicking and you have, like, let's say you kick with Minx and you have the slot for it, give her Second Wind, and then at the end of Minx's activation, she dodges 8 inches away from the opposing team after doing, like, 9 damage to them and snaring them or whatever the hell. Uh, so that's
that sounds pretty good.
yeah,
That sounds fun and interactive.
yeah, it's exactly that. It's both fun and interactive. Oh, I guess I didn't really talk about Minx. Minx is just, I mean, she's like Raid. She's like a mini Raid. She needs to be protected from counterattacks because she's 1 inch melee and doesn't have a knockdown. But if she gets to make her attacks and she keeps dodging between people and attacking different people, she does a comical amount of damage, especially with any damage buff, because she's gonna snare on the first attack she makes, and then she has a 3-on-3 with 5 tack, and it's momentous, and it has a dodge, and it snares
And they're
people.
down a defense. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just give Minx 4 influence every turn until she dies, and she will surprise you every time, because this team is good at giving damage buffs. So that 3-on-3 is actually going to be like a 4-on-3, and you might have an extra attack or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, she's awesome. I mean, I think even yeah, I think every guild in the game would want to have Minx, in my opinion. She's just crazy because she also can just sit somewhere for some reason and pass out marked targets. Like, she's just awesome. But that's the guild. They just hit hard. They go fast.
That's on brand. I get it. All
Yeah.
right. So that brings me to the final two, and then I have one sort of like parting question of like how do I focus learning from here at the very end. That if we get to it, awesome. Otherwise, I'll post it to you in Discord at some point.
Okay, cool. Can
Uh,
you give me just 1 minute? I'm gonna go grab some water, and then
of course.
we'll keep
Yeah,
going.
I'll
Yeah.
I'll do the same. I'll
Cool.
be right back.
Mic off.
I have returned. All right.
Mic on.
Hey, I'm back.
Yo.
I realized I checked my chat briefly, and I realized I didn't talk about avarice and original greed. I don't have much to say about them as far as I'm concerned. They're a meme character in the guild.
Yeah.
It's like you put them on the pitch, and it's like you have to do taxes every time you do their activation. It's too complicated, and the result is that you get a model that hits basically as hard as Minx, but also has a knockdown, which is cool.
Free
But
knockdown, right? Because he's a little chud.
yeah, but then if you fuck up anything even once, even a little bit, or a counterattack surprises you in a way that you didn't expect, you instantly lose 4 points and feel like a dumbass. So don't play them.
Got it. Back in the day, they were just hilariously good at being a striker because no one thought about that, and
Yeah.
then they got balanced to become the double murder bucket.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's way too much that could go wrong. I still think that kit is super dope. It's the first like metal kit I saw that ever came with a magnet because LOL.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Uh,
And
so
I wish they
I
were.
still like the concept.
Yeah, the concept's cool, and I wish they were good. But it's seriously, it's so much work, and the guild already hits so incredibly hard. Like, you don't need. Okay, if you can one round every model on the pitch, you don't need to be able to one round every model on the pitch for one less influence, but you have to do all this work. Like, it's. I literally think they're like a clock trap, which is a ridiculous idea, but.
For sure. Or if they assumed that someone would ascend to the skill level of being able to do all of this with Avarice and Greed on the fly, and you're watching them. It's like watching someone's micro in top tier League of Legends.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, yeah, when you're 400 APM Avarice and Greeting, you can do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not worth it. Okay, anyway, rats and morticians, right?
Yeah. So rats. The only question I got is, do I play the box?
I think you play Vet Graves pretty often in the sculpt
That's what I
slot.
thought.
Yeah.
It means I gotta find Vet Graves's. God damn it! All right.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think you can play the box fine, but you really want Vet Graves eventually. I mean, like, I even think not just for competitive sake, but for fun factor, because
Yeah. He has rats on his model. He's supposed to play with the rats. I feel like that's the joke.
Yeah.
I actually think that the LE one that's for the Ratcatchers Guild looks like a Mortician with a hand hanging off of him, and the one that's for the Morticians with the rats crawling over him
Oh
is
yeah,
way closer to being the Ratcatchers model. Like,
yeah,
as
totally.
someone who came into the game late, I'll
Mhm.
say that they got those backwards. I would say
Yeah.
that's how I would market them.
And yeah, the guild in gen, and like the other thing is that he brings this heroic which enhances the mascot, and I think this is like the coolest fucking mascot in the game. Every time I've played Ratcatchers, I have gotten the most joy out of activating the big dumb rat. So I
He's dope, dude.
yeah, I know, it's so sick. Like every time I get a dreadful shriek off, I feel like I just won the game. Like I'm like, hell yeah,
Come here.
I'm the smartest player in the universe. My rat has just ruined your plans. And then I still only like barely win 12-11 or whatever. Um
But you did it.
but
You
I did
achieved
it.
goals. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this guild is really cool and very hard to play. I think that they're good. I don't think they're like godlike or anything. But I think that they have so many wild moving parts that probably the best reason to play them is if you want to play a mixed guild and like genuinely want to challenge yourself because they are like the thing they're a good design in that they're successfully made to where you in order to win you have to be really creative. Like you have to your Piper activation has to be really complex and interesting all the time. It's got to be all about like pushing people around and moving them into circumstances that they don't want to be in and setting up like weird gang up situations that lock people into knockdowns with disease and all this stuff. And really, the only straightforward model in the guild is well, I guess there's two. There's Pelage and Scourge. Scourge.
Yeah.
And Scourge is exactly what you expect, and it's something that you need in a guild like this. He hit good, and he also has good feet for a
Also,
big man.
like the good feat for a big man is totally nuts. And like the problem with Scourge is like the game that I lost playing as Navs into this, I spent the first turn with the three model hit squad that you told me about. I
Mm.
went there and started a fight, and I just like fought the shit out of Scourge, and then it was like, oh, I just lost the game because I time walked myself on three models. Like
Yeah.
I did nothing to him. He's gonna snack break, and I'm gonna feel like an absolute asshole. And I'm just like, and the rest of the game was close, but I threw the game away because I effectively gave away like 10 influence and three activations on the first turn, and it was like,
Mhm.
oh, I'll make it a game after this, but I wish I could undo all of what I have done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They have a lot of they're tough to play against, even though I still don't think they're like the best guild in the game, just because they have a lot of ways to trick you. Oh, I also okay.
The
Uh,
finger wagon.
yeah, yeah. Well, I wasn't even going to talk about that. I should though, but um, I actually want to tell you about something that's more recent, and I hope is still in the game. I'll have to check the chat, even though I usually don't want to look at the chat too much while we're doing this, but just to make sure this is right. Okay, so if I don't think this got patched out before the game died, but um, okay, so Good Feet for a Big Man says the model may make passes without spending influence. Friendly models may make passes to this model without spending influence, right? Really cool rule. Really interesting and like a bizarre thing to have in this guild, and particularly on Scourge. He's a wild model. Okay, so Scourge is within 6 inches of Pelage. Um,
Yes.
so he's going to pass to Pelage. So let's say he makes his 2-die kick and he fails. Um, we're going to scatter the ball, and because of where Scourge is, it's going to hit that obstacle no matter what. So it snaps back to him because it lands here. It hits the obstacle, it lands here, and it can't be there.
Shit.
So he picks it
Right,
up.
because of path of least disturbance.
Yeah.
This
So
is very stupid. This is like finding a video game glitch where
Yeah.
it's like I'm just gonna keep holding A, and it's
Yeah.
either going to leave my possession at 1,000,000 miles an hour or come back to me and gain velocity.
Yeah, so the result, I think this is still in the game. The result of this rules interaction is that Scourge cannot miss the pass, but
Right, exactly.
you
Yeah, 'cause
you
would
do
just
have to
like he can do
roll.
it an infinite number of times.
Yeah.
He can keep going until he gets a screamer pass.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah. Anyway, and the other thing about that is it works exactly the same way to him because it also says people can pass to him without spending influence. So Pelage
Right.
can kick like this and
It's
must
gonna work.
must succeed
Yes.
eventually.
It's like that. Okay, I'll demonstrate the loop. Now that I've demonstrated the loop, can I do this an infinite number of times and succeed? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Right. Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
that's a thing. Okay. Jacob in my chat is saying he thinks it's still in the game. So I think I'm not telling you something that got patched out, and that
But
just
it also feels like I mean, I don't know how you would patch that other than like once per turn on this model's activation, it may make a pass to this and everyone else gets a good feet for a big man used token or
Yeah,
something
yeah, it's
nonsense
got to be
like that.
something complicated. I think it's just until Ratcatchers become the best guild in the game. I think that's just something that should stay in there as this goofy little quirk of their.
Yeah, it only works on some pitches in some situations anyway. It just feels
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
All right, so that brings us to the big close, which
Yes.
is Morticians. And the Morticians, I think we saved the best for last, but I'm not sure. I did not expect to leave our chats a Hunters player, and currently I am a Hunters player. Like I still think the aesthetic of the order is the best, and I'm gonna play every guild for sure because I enjoy them. But after playing one game with the Hunters, both me and my opponent said, "Yeah, that is right up your alley." And it's basically something where the more I play them, and the less I want to play until 1 a.m. because I don't know when anything does and I'm slow.
Yeah.
I think that is my jam for sure. But as much as the hunter style puts gas in my tank, I feel like the morticians will put even more. I just don't actually know what a mortician's game looks or sounds like. And like I've watched a couple of games on various streams, but no one is talking about what they're doing. They're only talking about like literally narrating the activation.
Right.
And
Right.
some of these activations just look like the dumbest imaginable thing to do. Like it's like, why are you doing this? I don't understand.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
let's
so
go.
I mean, part of it is that like really all three of their captains play almost completely differently. I think that there's unifying factors. Obviously, they're the control guild, and I think that no Mortician's plan is heavily focused on goals. I think you could plausibly expect a 2-2, but I really think that the way this guild ends up playing the vast majority of matchups is 4-1. Is you get 8 points.
And if you ever play 2-2, it's because like you have so convincingly made it seem like we're gonna kill you that the center of the pitch is open, and I'm just gonna do 2 back-to-back goals.
Yeah, something like that for sure. I guess I should say it's not always 4-1 because a lot of people play casket, and so it's really like 3-1. But 8 points of takeouts, 4 points of goals is what I mean.
Sure.
Um,
Is Casket's job trying to get the 2 extra points, or is Casket's job trying to say, put you in the naughty hole? Like, like if you're trying to play the fillet list and channel all of your influence into fillet, like I will put fillet in the box and it puts the lotion on its skin, therefore you can't have a 14 influence fillet or whatever, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah, Casket's job is to be a threat for the legendary all the time, and to otherwise spend time making the rest of his team very difficult to hit with Ghostly Visage and Foul Odor and Heavy Burden and stuff. I think so. Like a lot of times, if you have Casket on the pitch, you end up playing around the legendary, playing to make the legendary happen. And really, what it does, if you're playing against a good player who understands what the threat is it makes things where you're saying like, okay, I'm gonna do this and then they're gonna die. That's fine. Makes that not fine. So like an order player who's just like, I'm gonna nuke my brisket to get a goal on turn one because then I don't give a shit if she's dead on turn two. You make them give a shit. Like you make
Right.
them really, really, really not want that to happen, because a lot of games, especially if it's you get 4 points for it, a lot of games are done by the end of turn three or effectively done anyway. Um,
Right.
and or like fillet is another good example. You approaching with fillet has to work way differently in the face of casket. You basically, the way I think about it as the fillet player is, as long as I'm playing against casket until he uses casket time, I have to have momentum every turn because I can never let the morticians set up a first activation casket kill. It's just like can't happen. Um, anyway, okay, so the captains. I think I'll just talk about my favorite first. Scalpel, I think.
So let's go back to.
Oh, okay,
I
sure.
think I think I must have missed your take on fillet into casket is super interesting, and I want to make sure I unpack it and all aspects of what you just said.
Okay.
So, as the fillet player into casket, you have to. It's. I was expecting you to say I have to play outside of casket's threat range, but that's not what you said. Instead, you said I have to make sure that I always have the momentum lead, like cards plus momentum. Like I have to be able to go first. Does
Mhm.
that change if casket ever activates before fillet goes? Like if they can't set up a casket into casket double swing, or is it
Mhm.
basically like if they get to go first, no matter what, casket's going to be able to just brown town fillet? Like I
It's
don't actually
actually
know how scary he is as a threat.
it's not really about Casket's particular output, and against a 5-0 model on his own, Casket doesn't do that much to fillet. But the thing is that Casket only has to deal 1 damage to get Casket time, right? So it's not.
Oh, I thought he had to do the next time this model inflicts taken out. Oh, what you're saying is you leave that model at 1 and he does
Yeah,
the 1.
like if
Okay, yeah.
you if you're the Morticians player and you're playing as Casket and you're playing against Fillet, your whole game is probably going to be like, am I going to jail Fillet? Is this going to be the turn where I surround Fillet with 5 of my models and then I start the next turn with Casket walking up with 1 influence and taking 1 swing and killing her? Like it's the I basically I always want to have, because Fillet is such a mobile model. She has dodges on all of her playbook and stuff.
Right.
And she also punishes people who bunch up a lot. Like
Yeah.
if the opponent's
Yeah,
bunched
you're
up
all taking
and
3 and bleeding. Let's go. Right.
yeah,
Like yeah, the one fillet game I have under my belt, my opponent gave me like 4 models together and I was like, it's a playground. Let's go.
yeah. So the thing I guess what I'm saying is that like I always want Fillet to have agency. Like I always want to be given a chance to respond before Casket goes. Even if
Okay.
like I'll
Because you can get
always
her out of dodge and do
yeah.
some punishment and okay.
Because
Right.
even in a, I mean, also Fillet has 8 tack, so even in a really shitty situation, Fillet can probably get herself out of it if she gets to attack, if she gets to activate and spend 6 influence. Like that's
Right.
like a thing
It's
she
like
can do.
brisket in that way, right? Like if
Right.
brisket gets a turn, she's gone.
Yeah. So and yeah, the Morticians player is just like waiting for me to put Fillet in a place where the whole team can just bunch up around her and then Casket kill her. That's
Right.
basically what's going on.
Okay.
So
So I feel like I picked it up. Let's unless you think I'm missing something.
no.
Otherwise, feel free to move to captains. And starting with Scalpel is dope because Scalpel is like the she's spoken of in like hushed tones. Like
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
the model that is definitely the reason to play Morticians, and she's probably so good that she needs a nerf. But nobody on Earth is good enough to play her optimally. So instead, she's like the worst win rate captain of all of them. And yeah,
Yeah.
I don't really I would love to know what she does. My favorite Vince video, even though it's not everyone's favorite video, is the sad triangle. Like I absolutely love
Yeah.
watching that happen,
Mhm.
and it showed me it told me a lot about like it was baby's first tempo lesson for Guild Ball. So I enjoyed watching that.
Word. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So you actually have some background on what Scalpel does in sort of a general sense. I mean, she.
So I've read all of their cards extensively.
Okay.
I just don't actually. It's like Vet Hearn, where until I saw Vince's video, I didn't really see the whole plan come together. And until I
Right.
rolled an attack with Vet Hearn, I was like, oh, now that I'm considering my options, I see that one of them is like the opposite of Scorpion. Just get over here. Like I
Yeah.
Sub-Zero to you, right?
Mm,
So I really don't know what Scalpel's trying to do and how she wins, other than like put you in the sad triangle and then
yeah.
effectively take an activation away from you.
So I think that like at a top level, and probably a lot of the reason that people, certainly the reason why I talk about Scalpel as like the best captain or one of the best, or probably the best captain in the game, is that I think she has a very unique ability to be completely uninteractive given close to perfect play. I think that if she
Oh,
has.
so Scalpel killed Guild Ball. I get it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. um, I think that there's like a way to play her where you're really trying to just interact with one model every turn with Scalpel. So somebody within 10 inches of Scalpel roughly, or a little bit more if she has the ball or something. Um, and you hit that model a bunch of times while tooled up, and in doing so you drag that model closer to your own team by pushing them towards you, pushing Scalpel back towards your own team, spirit bombing even further towards you, and also voodoo stringsing any models that happen to be kind of close to you farther away from your team. um, you do that, and then you end the turn, and either that model has died or you start the next turn and you casket time them, and then you keep doing that until your opponent forfeits. I think that that's like a flippant description of a real thing that can really happen. Um, there was a better version of Scalpel before this one, which was just like the numbers were a bit better. Basically, it was still the same idea, same playstyle, same like basic mechanics, and that happened to me by a very very nice British man named Charles Nurser, who
Sure.
um, who this was right when that new Scalpel was had come out, and I sort of understood that it was really good, but I didn't have enough reps against it, and I mistakenly played Ox into it. I was really hot on Ox at the time, and
But Ox is pretty position dependent and
yes,
pretty range dependent.
yeah, and
Like I want to have this fight happen here with these people involved, and Scalpel's pretty good at taking that apart.
exactly, and this was in the World Championships after the one that I won, and I mean, like I didn't, I think I ended 12-2 or something. I think basically Nurser fucked up a little bit and gave me a kill at some point, but like I mean, I basically watched my team die one by one every turn from across the table, and there was like nothing I could do. Like it was, like I was so positionally like, uh,
Dominated.
yeah,
Sounds
just
like.
like so positionally outmatched and so totally fucked by the matchup that like there was like I was like desperately trying to like put marked targets on people to get in range of them, and then Casket would just immediately put Ghostly Visage on them, so my threat range to them had actually decreased, not increased, and Scalpel would second wind away every time she activated, and then this was back when Vet Hemlock
That
was
yeah.
much better, so
Yeah,
she
that
would
was
also
they.
get.
They changed that to be like a legendary voodoo something.
Yeah,
But like,
exactly.
yeah, I think that second wind, like, it it being what it used to be, I think, because I
Mm.
went back and read it at one point, but since I haven't read it in a long time, it feels like you got to just effectively unadvance. Like you went,
Yeah,
spent your turn, and then got out, and you went back to being in standoff. Except that like the models that didn't have second wind couldn't cheat and do that,
right.
so everyone got to kind of be a gun,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
not really. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that the thing about Scalpel though is that like so I've just described a very oppressive playstyle that if you played right I think would be incredibly difficult to deal with for pretty much any team. The thing is that she really doesn't have to do just that. That's not like her only game.
Oh,
She
she's not even a one-trick pony with the unbeatable dominant strategy.
yeah.
Got it. What other
So
tricks did she do?
so I mean yeah. The other thing is just that if you as long as you keep Scalpel alive and allocated, she like someone who understands the like push and pull of a sort of scrum can still do incredible things with her just by every time she activates your dice math as the Morticians player should like net go up by 6 or something. Like your next few activations suddenly went from being down 1 die to being up 3 dice against models and stuff because all your dudes get moved, all your opponent's dudes gets moved, they might get spirit bombed, everybody gets voodoo strings. It's just like your opponent thought they were playing the game well, and then suddenly none of their models are engaging anybody, and they're all engaged by Morticians models and stuff. And I think she can just like keep doing that turn after turn. Her main downside, which she has a mitigation for in unnatural stamina, but it is still a downside, is that outside of her own activation, she is both vulnerable and not contributing anything. She's like, her Voodoo Strings does not work on her counterattacks, and her counterattacks are pretty bleh. She can move herself 1 inch if she's allowed to attack, but she's also 1 inch melee. That's her whole counterattack, and she's a 4/1 with 16 boxes. Otherwise, she doesn't have any defensive stuff. So it's up to her team to defend her, and up to Second Wind to keep her away from people. But if she successfully does that every turn, she's absurdly difficult to deal with, in my opinion. That's the basic rundown, and I think you build a team around her kind of like you would Fillet, basically because you're sort of expecting that Scalpel is your main vector of interaction. Obviously, this team does not have the same tools available to it that Fillet does, but you still have options like Graves for tooled up, of course, which I think is a must-have with Scalpel. You have Casket, which is really good at defending her. You also have Cosset, which is sort of a threat range extension because she has Lure. And then you have more niche options like Silence and Pelage. Pelage is just another way to hit really hard, and also has like a no influence effect with her dilemma, her Cloak of Rats. And she's annoying to hit herself if you're playing against fighting teams because she's another empathy model. And then Silence, of course, gives you access to the Sad Triangle as well as some other fun stuff, and gets you a little bit more range damage, which could be nice too.
So the Silence is actually interesting. Silence has obviously his like the weirdest kit in the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that between what is it, Tucked and what's the partner
Shutout.
spell? Tucked and Shutout. Like, I felt like those were so unique and so powerful. And if I'm playing Control, like so much of this game is chessy in that there's activation, counter-activation, activation, counter-activation. I guess it's more go-y than chessy.
Mm-hmm.
Where like I can be attempting to box out something and then someone can make something happen that changes the stones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering if, or I was wondering whether or not that Silence was required to sort of enable and ensure that those things happen. Like, do I ever have to say, you're going to burn an activation now, or the activation that gets you out of this nonsense is going to happen?
Oh, you cut out, but I think I know what you said. You there?
Yeah, am I can still hear you. Can you
Oh
hear
no.
me again?
Now I can. Now I got you.
I'm still here. Okay. Yeah, basically is Silence. I never lost you.
Okay, cool.
That's anytime I drop, you can just take the dead air and run because
okay.
I think that I'll hear you. So is Silence a must take in order to let the Morticians shenanigans happen, or is Silence only required for matches where they have significant enough like stymies to your interaction that you have to play him?
I think it's more the second one. I think Silence is always an okay take, but I don't think he's required. And I think the thing about him is that, so yes, Shutout and Tucked are situationally incredibly powerful, and even when they're not incredibly powerful, they're still really fucking annoying. I think the downside for Silence is he's kind of got a target on his back, and those character plays can always just miss. And you can try to make them not miss, by making them more expensive, which is very cool,
Right.
and it's a great option
Right.
for him to have, but they can still miss. And if you pay extra for them and they do miss, you have thrown away a lot of your resources for the turn.
Right.
So I think, yeah, the sort of plus and minus of Silence is that he's incredibly powerful when he's on, but you are gambling a lot to make him work, especially because presumably if you want one of these things to hit, it's very
you're still
bad if
timing it and if it and like the times that you're casting it, it means it's impactful. So not having it happen means whatever you've hinged on having it work is now not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, for example, going back to Fillet, just because Fillet's a really good example for a lot of stuff because she's just such a straightforward, like, I'm a
all in.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm a murder machine.
You know what she's doing, and she's very predictable, and you can play into or around it or out of it.
Yeah. So let's say that a fillet came into your Scalpel Morticians lineup, and you have Casket, and you get to start the turn, but you haven't really set up on fillet. She's still full HP. She's not engaged by that many models, but she's over by you. And you have Silence and you have Casket. You don't even have to say Scalpel. It could really be any of the captains. You could be looking at that and you'd be like, all right, if I get a shutout on Fillet, I am probably Casket timing her at the end of this turn, and I am just going to win the game off of that. Like, it just, there's my Fillet playing opponent has allocated her 6 he won't be able to use, and then she's gone for another turn, and she's like his whole list effectively. So I've pretty much won the game off of that. That's probably true. Um, but if Silence goes first and hits Fillet once, gets momentum, and then tries to shut her out and misses, you have lost the game. Because you've given up all of your going first advantage effectively to deal 2 damage and generate no momentum on Fillet, and then Fillet gets to activate and turn your team into like tomato soup. So
Right.
that's extreme because Fillet has 5 defense and Silence doesn't like 5 defense, obviously, but that is the type of game you're playing with Silence all the time. And I think actually that highlights something else about Scalpel's control, which is not true in the rest of the guild, is that Scalpel's control does not miss. Like, I mean, she gets to voodoo strings on 1 if she wants to, and if she spirit
Right.
bombs off the playbook, it automatically hits every model.
Right.
So Obulus can miss, Silence can miss, Cossack can miss, Casket can miss, Scalpel doesn't miss, which I think is a huge deal.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, when I was looking at the Puppet Master, it's like, yeah, it can miss, but like it's probably not going to because it's 4 dice.
Totally, totally.
But like the fact that Scalpels is quite literally diceless
Yeah.
when she gets it off the playbook,
Yep.
and like Voodoo Strings is just an attack, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's relevant.
And 7 tack anatomical precision is an incredible attacking profile too. Like she does against anything with armor, she's better than 8 tack mathematically. So she's actually more consistently hitting stuff than Fillet is. Obviously, Fillet does more damage, but yeah.
But getting more columns of hits, right?
Yeah, yeah. So no, Silence is not automatic. But you just really have to be in on the Silence game if you pick him, and I think that's okay because he's very powerful. And I think that's a lot of Morticians, really. Maybe more than every other guild. And I think this is good for balance. To be clear, I think this is a good thing about the guild, is that when you commit to a game plan with Morticians, you are all in, because everything about them is fragile. When parts of their game plan go wrong, they die, or they get scored on instantly, or whatever the hell. They've spent all of their influence to do some goofy series of enemy movements and activation control and so forth. And if it comes apart, it comes apart big, um, which is cool.
And that's
It's
kind
fun.
of like Morn's gimmick, right? Morn is like, all I know is that this person's gonna activate. Like, that's what I do. So
Yep.
it's like you can get 10 points. I don't give a shit. I'm doing this.
Yeah. So Morn is like almost the opposite of Scalpel in that way. Morn is like trying to get a lot of people into an area where they are very sad. Um, and is like continuing to try to present really frustrating targets like Casket and Gast, or Pelage, also another very good example. Like, Gast under Morn is a huge pain in the ass, because Morn will put Malice on him, so he's more likely to hit his unmaskings, and then will also put Hollowed on him, so that he is fear and rising anger and empathy, and then she will just shove Gast up your throat, and you are like, you have to attack him, but God, you do not want to. Um, so yeah, Morn is a very defensive playstyle, and I think Morn really wants to receive, because Morn's big problem and big question is like, why would I even go over there, right?
Yeah, I don't want to go to the little girl's playhouse. Like, obviously, It's terrifying. Look at her, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Gast is over there for God's sake.
Exactly. She usually has a cast of characters who, like, every single one of them has some stupid rule on their card, either natively or because of Morn, where it's like, if I attack this, I take damage. If I attack this, I don't get momentum. If I attack this, it costs 2. Blah blah blah. And it's just, yeah, it's very frustrating to attack. I think Morn suffers, in my opinion, against goal scoring teams, and I think that's where you really need Scalpel or Obulus to come in if you're playing Morn, because she is way worse at deterring scoring teams from doing stuff. Like,
Right, because they're not trying to apply playbook damage results. They
right,
don't really care, and they don't want to be moved, and she's the least good at that.
yeah, and also they don't. They have a lot fewer reasons to bunch up, which is, and being bunched up is something that both people like that Gast and Pelage take a ton of advantage of. Like, Pelage, even on zero influence, Pelage can like walk up and be within 2 inches of three people, and then you're like, is half my team snared, or do I take 9 damage for no influence?
I have to answer this question 3 times.
Yeah. Actually,
All
it's
of
not
the
even three
answers are
time. You
bad.
that's actually, it's even harder than that, because the way this her dilemma works, you
Oh my
answer the
God,
same
no
thing for
way.
everybody. So
No, because when you're like, is it A or B? I was like, I might snare these two and take 3 on this. I
nope,
cannot
can't.
do that.
No,
Okay,
you can't
great.
do that. You have to. you have. There's always going to be somebody who's getting the bad result, basically.
That's actually nuts. Like even if there's 2 people,
Yeah,
like it's often rare that you want them to both have answered the same way.
yeah, yeah. Pelagius is really tough to deal with, especially if you happen to be a guild that has mostly melee like combatants or whatever, which is a kind of weird quirk of her card. But yeah, she's really frustrating to deal with in general. I think more so for fighting guilds for sure, because they don't get momentum for her. But even the scoring guilds struggle, because sometimes she'll just walk up and delete a model, or really put tons of pressure on them. So. And then there's Obulus, who is I don't know. Obulus might be the most talked about man in Guild Ball, just through sheer history. I think it's probably him or Thresher. Uh,
I will
but
say that I have heard actual nothing about Obulus outside of when I watched Vince's primers, Guild X in 4 minutes, the Morticians in 4 minutes. He said that he was the archetypical control striker or control captain, and he
you cut out a second. I don't know what to do with this airtime. I was waiting with bated breath to hear what else he did besides being the archetypal control guy. Um. Okay, I
am I
got you
back?
again. Yeah,
Okay.
gotcha.
So yeah, he was the archetypical control guy, and he didn't change. So he's just as good as he always was. Moving on. And it was like, well, that's super fantastic if I was going from a delta, but if I'm coming
Yeah.
from 0, I don't know anything about him.
Okay, so a long time ago in season 1, back before we were all born, um, and season 2, I should say, season 1 and season 2, Obulus was the best character in the game. It was so obviously the case that the World Finals were a mirror match between Obulus. The NA Finals, top 6, 5 of us played Obulus. He was just the best. Now he's not as good. He used to just be statistically godlike. In addition, he had all the stuff that you can see here, but he also could take 8 influence instead of 7. He had one more tack, and he could take O Rage, the Union model, in his guild. Who
Oh,
could
cool. He's pretty good with Puppet Master.
Yeah, and well, no, actually, back then you couldn't puppet master him. He had this weird rule where he couldn't be affected by character plays, but you could tool up Obulus, and then Obulus could wander somewhere and make 8 attacks in one activation, tooled up. Um,
Okay, cool.
so that was obviously not the intended play style for a control captain. He just walking around somewhere out mathing people. Uh, Now what he does, he's kind of a jack of all trades. I think he actually ends up being the most scoring captain of the 3 Morticians captains, and the reason for that is that he's really good at moving himself and also moving the ball. A lot of times Puppet Master will take the ball from people, or it will just give himself another jog, and he'll expand his goal threat a pretty significant amount. Um,
Yeah, like based on the fact that like Puppet Master and passes mean that there's just a lot of instances of moving again.
yeah,
It makes sense to me that he would either set up the most goals or score the most goals on his own.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that he does is the thing I was describing about like spending a lot of time trying to just gang up all your models onto one model and then casket time them. I think he does that specific thing probably the best, because he will really just wait for a model to activate and then puppet master them closer to his team, and then his whole team will just walk up. Um, and he'll just like keep doing that as long as you allow him. And obviously, you can only cast in time once, but after that, he'll try to set up Pelage or Cosset or whatever other heavy hitter you have, and just keep pulling people in, knocking him down, laying him out, killing him. Um, Obvious is really good at being uninteractive, with an exception. He's very hard to hit for anybody who's melee, but he is made of paper if you have decent range threats, because unpredictable movement doesn't protect him from range, and he's a 4-1.
And 4 defense, right?
Yeah, he's a 4-1 with 14 boxes. So if you don't care about unpredictable movement, he's actually like comparably easy to kill to the average squatty. Um, so that's a downside for him. His legendary play is one of the coolest abilities in the game, in my opinion. It's really simple in that it just takes all the MP, the
Right,
momentum.
but like the idea is until you pull the trigger, it's always in play.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so he's putting pressure as long as he hasn't activated on the opponent's momentum. I think a lot of people will tell you that the way to play around that is to be spending your momentum like hotcakes. Like you always want to leave yourself with 1. Everybody knows that. The difference between 1 and 0 momentum is massive. But
infinity.
yeah, exactly. But anything above 1, you kind of spend down, so you just make it so that.
Dude, I think the way to play around it is pop it. Like, yeah, do
Okay.
steal my momentum. I don't give a shit. Oh, do you have 12? Great. How is that different than 5?
Yeah.
You will be going first next turn, and I will rebuild my momentum now, and then I will be able to play the game for the rest of time.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. A friend of mine, Jordan Knack, who you probably heard about, or if not heard from.
I have Jordan's secondhand models.
Oh.
Yeah, Pat and Vince were passing them around, and apparently they tried to give them back to Jordan like 1,000 times. And when I mentioned that I was going to get a bunch of people into Guild Ball, Vince was like, "Would you like a bunch of models?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. How much do you want for them?" And Pat was like, "I want your address so I can get them out of my house, please."
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad Pat did.
So,
Pat is sitting 10 feet from me right now, and he did not tell me he did that. But
dude, he also sent them apparently via like private jet. They got here in like 12 hours or some shit. It was crazy.
Pat,
Seriously though, one day it was wild.
That's awesome. Pat has a long history of shipping Guild Ball shit around. Well, I'm glad they went to a good home. Yeah, for a long time when Pat, I don't know if you gathered this from the podcast. I'm sure we've said it at some point or another, but Pat and I are roommates and have been for a while.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know if that was still true, but I knew it was true at one point.
Yes, it is currently true. And for the 3 years that we lived in our previous place, we Jordan's models were basically just like our shadow boxing models for when we were like, ah, shit, we don't have this model. Let's just dig through Jordan's shit, and we would call it the dead man's chest because Jordan no longer plays kickball.
Yeah. I heard he was like not arguably the best player that you guys have ever played against, though. Like, just legendarily good.
Yeah. I mean, I think we got good because we played with him for sure. Like, I guess before he started playing, I was dominating the Chicago area roughly and like the sort of close Midwest. And then he and Pat started playing about roughly the same time, and I suddenly had a lot of competition.
And then that's what causes everyone to get good.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
The same reason Seattle got good at Netrunner is like we had a couple of really good Netrunner players, and then a friend of mine and I took it seriously and decided to start like practicing like it was magic. And then we took a run at states in both Oregon and Washington, and we won both of them. And then we went to Worlds, and I got second. We played like the same list. It was dope. But like it happens when a community decides to take something seriously, and 1 or 2 people who are good level up everyone else. Japan did it with Magic when one guy opened a store and was like, "Okay, we're all teammates now. Like we're all going to practice here, and we're all going to be excellent. No one hides decks from each other." And then Japan for like 3 years was unassailable in tournament Magic.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that about Japan. I didn't really know they had like a Magic scene.
It's big, yeah.
Awesome.
So the Yu-Gi-Oh! We were fighting with Yu-Gi-Oh! For the first slot, and eventually the Wizards' other game called Duel Masters took it over, which is Duel Masters was actually my first foray into game design.
Oh, cool.
My internship was on Duel Masters, but other than that, Magic's still huge there.
That's awesome. But anyway, yes, Jordan's an excellent player, and one of the things that he changed my mind about right when he started playing, basically, was I had already. I'm not going to claim to be the only person who had discovered this, but I was somebody who discovered independently that Obulus in his season 1 and 2 form was just like completely stupidly broken. and I was playing all Obulus, and I was dominating everybody. And
Yeah, he was new game too strong. Like
yeah,
people don't understand how the game works. Here's this guy, he's control. He probably has to be good to compensate for being bad early, and then it's like,
yeah.
oh no, he's just too good.
I literally chose Morticians because I really like Corvids, so I liked that their mascot was a raven.
Yeah, there you go,
and
dude. They're awesome animals.
yeah, and then I stumbled into the best guild in the game by far. Uh, but but yeah, Jordan changed my mind and was like, no, I actually think the way to play this, at least as a fighting team, is to just go absolutely nuts on momentum. You'd be like, yeah, exactly what you said. Be like, here, have 14 momentum. I don't give a shit, and then lose that turn, and then play the rest of the game without the
Right. And
legendary
if
on the
they don't
table.
pull the trigger on the 14, I know that you're no longer going to keep me hostage and I can just keep you honest the whole time, right?
Yeah,
It's kind of
exactly.
lose-lose. Like, yeah, you're going to get infinite momentum, but like you can't hold it over my face for the rest of time. Like,
Yeah,
please use your legendary.
yeah.
It's like playing into play the piper, like or pay the piper. When I
Mm,
was playing against piper, it's like, yeah, like I should maybe look at my ranges before I cast abilities, make sure I sequence properly, but like I'm not going to not access the momentum half of the game just because
yeah,
you're going to get momentum. Like, fine, you get
right.
it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, but either way, I think that Obulus's legendary adds a lot of really interesting stuff to any game that he's in. Uh,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Like being able to say one turn of the game that I go first is very cool.
yeah, exactly. And it's got even more depth to it than it used to because of how the playing cards have special effects. So the ability to be like, I'm going first and I'm using a +1 card that has some crazy
That
effect
plus
is,
two influence, right? Like
yeah,
like I'm gonna go first and I have bring out the knives, right? Like
right,
or I'm gonna go first, but I know that at the bottom of your turn, you cannot have you can't encourage this person to stand them up, so they're knocked down for my activation that I'm going to take first, right?
right,
Like because the other half of depriving them of momentum means that like the difference between 1 and 0 is infinite. It's infinite because like you
yeah,
can't death stance, you can't counterattack, you can't rest, right?
yep,
Like all of these things are true, and being able to turn that on once, even if you don't end up going first, is huge
yep,
because you just change the dynamics of saying that like having none of this currency is enormous. And honestly, having one of it is being able to buy literally any non-snapshot momentum play in the game, right?
right,
I think
yeah,
the one you don't buy is bonus time, but all the rest of them are like viable in whatever situation. But
mm,
like especially not being able to rest at the top of an activation is huge
yep,
because it means that like knockdown is fatal. Knockdown is killing an activation unless you have a way to get that model up.
yep. That's exactly right. Um, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to talk about the rest of the guild, not because like they're all just so contextual based on the captain's plan. I think. No, there are really no models that are like only godlike hitters or only godlike scorers. Bonesaw,
So
I guess, is the most.
basically like if you could just broad strokes say like if you're playing captain A, I would expect you to be playing model X, and if you're playing captain B and you're playing model Y, you probably got yourself confused.
Yeah,
Like
here.
what are some like expected pairs and unexpected pairs?
Yeah. Let me do this. Actually, you know what? I like Vile Swarm. Fuck the haters. um, okay. I'm just gonna put together some
I think
sixes.
actually that at least the Chicago consensus is that Vile Swarm is dope. You only play Dirge if you're playing Cosset.
Yeah, yeah. Um, that's how
Is that not just
I see
the
a lot. I
accepted?
mean, almost every time I played against Morticians in the past year, which honestly, to be clear, is not a ton. I
Sure.
think they've been against Dirge, if I remember correctly. So
Wow, Vileswarm seems dope.
I think so too. Um, I think that
And like Dirge has flying and singled out, but like I don't know.
one of the weird things about, or one of the things about Dirge that is sort of hard to understand is that like sometimes you just need a model to go get the ball, especially if you're receiving. And Morticians are
Yeah.
actually kind of bad at that in like a weird way. So they don't have a lot of super fast models, and they have a lot of models that want to be standing somewhere and doing a character play.
We're
So
all just knights and sometimes you just want a rook. Like
yeah,
please go get this thing and not be
exactly.
an idiot. Like can you
Yeah.
just be normal and go straight?
Yeah, exactly. And they really do not have that option. That's just like not a.
No.
So
I must weeble wobble and I'm so good at it.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's say we're doing this, and oh right, I already have a casket on pitch, so we do that. And then let me try to think of something pretty interesting to do with Obulus. Oh god. I think it would probably still have a Ghast. And then let's do. Oh, actually, hang on. Okay, Morn doesn't get Cosset. Morn gets Vet Graves, so that we can do extra fun Vileswarm stuff. But Cosset will go over here. I think that's good. And then I am going to give other people the benefit of the doubt and put Bonesaw over here. And then who would end that list? I guess it would. Man, I'm just putting Pelage in every list. That's
I
fine.
was gonna say,
Yeah.
I think you're just gonna put a Pelage there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think these are like plausible lists. Certainly not the be all end all.
No,
But
that's fine. It's basically like, and the thing is, once I play either with or against them,
yeah.
I will have more information. And like, because right now they are only a hypothetical control guild, of which
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone make an activation that wasn't in a game that like was more of a meme than anything
Yeah.
else. Like, so, like at this point, if these are viable lineups where I can play each captain once or play against each captain once and say like, okay, we haven't made a terrible mistake, right?
Yeah.
Like this is something where we should be able to, as players, figure out what's happening and then make changes from there. Like if then
Yeah.
I play against a different guild and it's like, oh man, I actually don't need Bonesaw because I'm never going to try to score. So
Yeah.
instead, I'll play whoever, right?
Yeah.
That works for me.
So yeah, basically the scalpel list is gonna load up scalpel and try to be as uninteractive as possible and get a casket time and then just super solo with scalpel for as long as you can. This Morn list is going to receive and just make every activation the opponent has as miserable as possible while trying to explode people with Ghast. And this Obulus list is going to try to score 2 goals and isolate 2 people to kill with Pelage and Ghast together. That is my pitch for these sixes, which are probably not super great, but I think they're fine. There's only so many choices you can make, and I'm not putting Vet Hemlock in any of these because she's too expensive for what she does. So, and I think Gaffer sucks. I don't really get Gaffer. Gaffer is this like weird. It's just too much. It's sort of like Avarice and Greed to me. It's like too much work to get this Red Fury thing to happen, and I think Gaffer would be godlike if Voodoo Strings could happen outside of Scalpel's activation, but since it can't, when he Voodoo Strings Scalpel, she basically doesn't have half of her card, so I don't get him.
Got it. Okay. And then what about my boy Brain Pan and Memory?
Oh yeah.
They're a meme or are they dope? I will say that Memory reads like a champion.
Yeah, Memory is really
that
cool.
Model is rad.
I've always thought they were kind of a meme, but I'm trying to decide if that. Okay, so a lot of times when I play against Blade Pan Memory, I happen to be playing Butchers. I mean, they are my most played guild, but I do play other stuff. But I happen to be playing against Butchers the last couple times I played against Brain Pan Memory, and Brain Memory has this very unique thing against specifically Butchers, where if Ox ends his activation engaging Memory, he just gets the owner. Yeah, so he triggers the old ways. So
that's so dumb.
Yeah. So
I love it.
That has made me think that these models are bad. I actually think they might be comparably good strikers to Bonesaw, or even better. Like you take them in place of Bonesaw in my Obulus list. Oh, my Vassal froze. Oh, there we go. I think they're a really hard model to assess because they have so many unique strengths and weaknesses. But I think they're good if played well. I think I think they can fit into like a secondary striker or a secondary beater list, or excuse me, position, not list. And you just really got to remember the upkeep. Like you got to make sure to move them.
You absolutely have to move that guy, right? Otherwise, he doesn't do anything, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, his playbook seems hilarious. And honestly, just I kind of want to at the beginning of every one of my turns just inch this little terrible fine doll towards you. Like that's just the actual physical play of the model seems like a lot of fun. Like here comes Memory, let's go.
It's funny that Morn has control strings too, because I do see Brain Pan and Memory be played with Morn sometimes, and it's just like I don't know. That's not the type of list I would want to play. It's too much fucking upkeep. Like every
Exactly. Okay, I'm gonna do this and let's go. Okay, so two here, let's go, let's go.
Mm,
Yeah.
that would drive me nuts. I just like clock myself or forget it half the time, but that's just me.
It's like harvest markers, but way more impactful.
Yeah.
Like you just don't have an entire squaddy if you don't do it, as opposed to not having an influencer in activation.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and that I guess that leads me to the sort of takeaway question, and I'm not entirely sure how to phrase this, but
Okay.
I'm going to try my best, and my internet's definitely going to cut out, and it's going to be terrible. But uh, what I'm curious is like, what should I focus on next? And what I mean by that is like, if I was talking to someone and teaching them Magic, I would talk about like card advantage or tempo or
Mm,
who's the beatdown. And so what I'm looking at is like you say things like X is a dodgy model or X has weak counterattacks or X is squishy. Like if I were to focus on learning one aspect of like, should I be paying attention to memorizing threat ranges? Should I be starting to think about like what models are the models I want to sink influence into fighting or not fighting? Should I be thinking about uh, learning when to tempo goals next, or should I think about like memorizing what counterattacks on what models are good and or bad? Like what? How should I stack rank my learning
hmm.
for the most progress the fastest? And I know that the answer is I eventually want to learn all of these things and they all come with
Sure, yeah.
experience, but like where do I sort of lean my elbow on the value button to make sure that I'm learning the most impactful stuff first?
Um, I think.
Like I want to learn how to wave dash. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I got you. Um, I think what I get. Okay, I'm gonna. This will take a little bit of explaining, but I think what you should be. You should spend time looking at playbooks, and I think the thing to think about is when models like okay, so most playbooks have a moment when they break in one direction or another, where like X result becomes likely enough that this model is going to have a really good activation, or X result becomes unlikely enough that this model is going to have a really bad activation. And that's actually like a really complicated question that changes a lot throughout the game because of things like cover and crowdouts and
Crowd outs,
gangups
right? So
and
like let's assume that I'm trying to play against a Spigot or Hooper, and it's like, oh man, if I ever am net down 2 dice versus that Spigot, my model is dead. So I need to
yeah,
make sure that I'm either keeping parity or I'm at least crowding him one or I'm in cover. Is
right.
that like the okay? And
Yeah.
find those breakpoints on various models.
Yeah. So like, yeah, like thinking about Fillet, it's very easy to see if you look at her card that she really wants to hit the Blood Rain, right? She wants her first attack,
Oh yeah.
probably a charge, to hit the Blood Rain, and then if she hits the Blood Rain, she's a god, right? Um, so if you were playing a lot of Fillet, I think you want to like look at some turn ones, like get your friends to give you a six that they would probably play against butchers, and be like, I'm gonna rank these models from worst to best in terms of what Fillet wants to
Who I want
attack.
to be charging.
Yeah, and then play a turn one and be like, damn, none of my options are good. Why is that? Did I put Fillet in the wrong place? Did my opponent set up defenses really well so the one squishy model that I would definitely get a Blood Rain against is like way in the back? How do I get around that, etc. So for like hunters, like I think try to like look take Jakar and look for models. Try to figure out what you want the opponent's defense to look like, where he's definitely going to hit that two and gut and string on his first attack. Um, and then also look for models that have that defensive profile and have a bad counterattack against Jakar, where he can definitely get into melee and then
And they won't knock him down or push him out.
right. Um, And then that will expand to thinking about, okay, there's a lot about Jakar that actually makes me think that he almost never wants to be a first activation unless he can hit somebody who's knocked down, because the first result he wants to take is unmomentous. So he doesn't if he's going first, he just cannot be knocked down or you'll lose the activation. That's a really important thing to think about. And then it's like, okay, let's say that I get the two gut and string, and then my next three attacks all do 3 damage. Let's be let's assume that's reasonable. Okay, so that's 11 HP. So what types of models am I looking for where I can kill a model by doing 11 HP, and it's pretty likely that I get there, and it's pretty likely that I don't get knocked away in the middle of it? That type of thing. So like this expands out and out until you get to a point where activations are predictable to you, even though you don't actually know great dice math. Like you don't know like the exact odds that each of those attacks are to hit 2 damage or 3 damage or 4 damage. But you're looking at this type of model, this certain target that you've kind
Right,
of decided.
and this is exactly what I'm asking. Like, I want to know. So, what we're talking about, there are words for this. Like, I want to know how to build the right heuristics, right?
Right. Yeah.
And in order to build these heuristics, I want to know what to value. And like, in order to master a guild or master a model, like, focusing on. I guess I was looking at too many reactive angles, and I think what I'm learning from what you're saying is like figure out the idealized situation in which you would find the model, so that way whenever you find this situation, you'll know and you can take advantage of it, and you'll also start thinking about how to craft that situation. And if you
Exactly.
can't craft that situation, then you'll think about what your opponent did to not give you that situation, and if that happens, you'll think about what you can do to ensure that you do get that situation, or change, going so far and so far back and so abstract as to pick a different model. Like, if you
Mhm.
can't ever craft the situation where this model is going to do the thing they're good at, like in this matchup, you probably shouldn't have it.
Exactly. Like, yeah. So for Filet, I have ideas in my head about types of models that she one rounds if she gets the Blood Rain on the first attack. I also have ideas about models that she one rounds if she knocks down first on a charge, then gets Blood Rain on the next attack because she had to knock down because of the counterattack. Thinking about Pat, for example, I'm sure Pat has plenty of ideas about like this model will get one rounded by Hooper without setup. This model will get one rounded with Hooper with just Spigot setting up. This model will get one rounded with Spigot and Corker setting up Hooper. Does that make sense? Like
Yep.
it's like where where does like what can you punish with one, two, or three activations leading up to a certain decision? And there's goal versions of this too. Like you learn goal threats and like how your playbook interacts with that. But I think, to me at least, I build that knowledge up from the playbooks because almost everything interacts with the playbooks in this game. So,
Yep. Yep. And that's why it's good, and
and
that's
that's
why
why
I'm
it's good.
hooked. Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I hope that was
It's
helpful. I hope that was at least
it's
an.
the weirdest part of the card. It absolutely is. Yeah. I got the direction I was looking for, because the thing is, like, uh even though this game is relatively, and I strong air scare quotes here, relatively simple,
Hmm.
uh the depth of information and the context is uh pretty massive, and
Yeah,
it
totally.
is like magic in that way, right, where that it is very 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 deep, uh if not very wide,
Hmm.
and the problem is I didn't know where to focus on the depth first,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I like looking at the cards. I still don't know them all. Like, the more I expose myself to them, the more I read the word damage in empathy instead of not reading the word damage in empathy.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, then the more I learn. And I think that playbooks are the thing that will. They aren't sticking right now, but that's because they'll stick when I see them do the thing to me.
Totally.
Often,
Yeah.
like, and also, like, I'm not a visual learner, and I don't really have a visual memory.
Hmm.
So until I know the math of something, or until I see it in terms of like a system or a decision or a game piece, it's not a real result to me.
Hmm.
Uh, and then, uh, yeah, the rest is just getting. I can't wait until I have played with or against all of the guilds, which I still have yet to do.
Yeah.
But the game is still new, still fun, and I think that I've hit the ground running. And when we're allowed to play again, I think that my nascent community will thrive for a little while at least.
I'm sure it will. We
And
should
this
play
was
some.
this was huge for this. I was actually going to mention that. Like, I don't know where to go from here, but my girlfriend jokingly texted me about 20 minutes ago. Since this is the last time you're going to talk about him, world champion Guild Ball, and you should world champion Netrunner him. So if you want to learn Netrunner or Magic, I would be happy to teach you the opposite game. Uh, but yeah, mostly if you just want to
Yeah.
battle on Vassal, man, I'll play. I also, like, I want to play with Nate. or like watch a game between you and Nate where I'm birding one of you and then I you know, chirp about what I would do and then see how it actually plays out differently. Or we
Sure.
play like I play a game against X person and then like we just watch the replay and you agree or disagree with the things I did given various choices I made earlier in the game or not.
Mm.
Uh yeah, I'm super happy about this. And honestly, like I will say that all three of y'all from Strictly Worst and like everyone from the Discord have been wonderful in terms of being supportive and giving me access to figurative and literal resources. I can't believe Pat sent that stuff out. I was able to send Vince a magic care package. So I don't know if Pat is a magic player or not, but I'll send one his way as well if he's down. Because basically the only cool swag I have is from the game that I worked on. And if any of you decide that you ever want to play Destiny, let me know. It'll
Will
be
do.
uh, but yeah, I think that's it for me tonight. Unless you want to jam a game, but I assume it's midnight for you right now,
No,
and that's
yeah, I
what
gotta
mine
go to
is.
bed.
Yeah. Uh, but so this was a super long one. I'm glad to finish up. But yeah, I don't want to be a stranger. This was super dope. I'm glad to have been connected into y'all's network, and we should play a game sometime.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, and I maybe I will hit you up for those card games. I've never really gotten too much into card games, but I want to try
Oh
sometime.
my God, you definitely have. You just don't know it. Like you are a card game player. Like you like Melee and Guild Ball. I promise you like Magic the Gathering.
That's fair. Yeah.
So, all right, man. Good night, and I'll hit you up this week.
Word. All right. See ya.
Bye.
All right. Well, I'm gonna turn off the stream. Holy shit! I've dropped so many frames. What the fuck? What happened? Why? What the fuck? Well, people were responding in chat, so it looks like it was still watchable. But sorry if the quality was awful. Jesus. Wonder what happened to our internet. All right. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I wanted to zoom in on coolest best model, but I don't. Is there like a way to make this bigger? I guess I could just hemophilia. There's no way to make this bigger. Next rim. Previous rim. Yeah. I still don't know how to use Vassal after all these years. Anyway, good night, everybody.